His eyes were empty, wide and lifeless. The tubes rhythmically sucked in air, while alarming hissing sounds were periodically heard. Crying uncontrollably, my mind flashed back, replaying vivid images of the last 8 hours. Oh my God, what have I done? That damn Carl. He has been my husband's best friend since elementary school. Why did I do this? Well, yes, he is 6 feet 5 and tall, muscular blonde, Swedish Apollo, but I loved my husband. Carl is simple, a pure man, but with little intelligence. His ability to please a woman in bed is legendary and impossible to resist. At least that's the excuse I'm clinging to now. My husband is a brilliant man, handsome and caring. He worships the ground I walk on. He bottles the air I breathe, and yet I consider him insignificant. He looks like an average Joe, only his name is Jack Average Jack. Jack pales in comparison to Carl, at least in appearance. But my Jack, despite his average height and simple appearance, is a very smart and extremely rich man. His personal fortune extends to the farthest corners of the globe. Okay, he inherited most of his wealth, but some Wall Street analysts will tell you that in the 5 short years since receiving his inheritance at age 21, he has nearly doubled it. Now I admit, quite bashfully, that I was a fortune hunter. I have been blessed with feminine proportions that fit most straight men's idea of perfection, and if that definition includes long red hair and deep emerald green eyes, then that is up for debate, but that is what God and my Irish roots have blessed me with. I'm relatively tall for a girl at 5 feet 9 and in 4-inch heels, I look down on 6-foot tall men. Some people compare me to a young Nicole Kidman, like in that racing movie she was in. So again, I shamefully admit that I spent my later teenage years preying on rich men. I would purposely attend popular clubs or events dressed head to toe in a ridiculously short dress or sparkly tunic that would attract the attention of my weakened, unsuspecting prey. Don't get me wrong, I'm not completely stupid. I completed a bachelor's degree in journalism, but it was more about vanity than any real desire to pursue this profession. The title carried prestige, and it offered access to famous events and interesting places. Not that I'd ever been hired for a job, but a fake press card and real references, a killer miniskirt, and, well, you get the picture. Of course I read gossip, scroll through BRW or Forbes, because I'm always on the hunt, looking for that special man who might notice me, fall in love with me. Tall, slender red-haired girl in a little green sequin dress with an indecent slit sideways and stupid high heels that could twist your ankle. 3 years ago, I noticed a rather simple, but at the same time handsome guy sitting alone at a bar in Wentworth. The site was the site of the annual investor meeting of Millennium Corp, a global real estate development company that owns some of the world's most expensive properties. I found out about this while scrolling through Forbes. Now, thanks to my research skills, I also learned that this simple nobody swirling his whiskey was Jack Stevens, CEO of Used Inc., United States External Developments. It was one of his 6 companies, but the one that dealt with McShares. The day I walked into that bar was my 21st birthday, and to say I felt confident, and lucky is an understatement. It was my birthday, and I was on a roll. I quickly walked towards the marble floor in search of my prey when suddenly a large guy lazily appeared in my path, blocking the sunlight pouring through the huge windows overlooking Central Park. "Excuse me, madam. Can I help you with something today?" He sounded like a bear, a big black bear with a rough voice. "Who ate my porridge?" I tried to get around him, but he was too fast for such a big man. "I'm trying to meet my boyfriend Jack, if you'll let me pass, sir." I tried to press. His smile conveyed both humor and disbelief. "If I may, madam, I have strict instructions to expel anyone not associated with the convention. Your pass, please." He didn't even bother holding out his hand in anticipation. The arrogant bastard. "Jack, honey, this man doesn't believe who I am." I screamed in despair, thinking that I only had one chance. The big guy looked surprised and turned to look at my prey, seeming confused by my apparent familiarity. Jack Stevens, in turn, looked up from his thoughts, somewhat surprised to hear his name. I took the opportunity to step around the gorilla and rush towards my stunned captive, holding out my arms and crying out, "Jack, tell him who I am, honey." Yes, yes, brave, daring. Well, bite me. I heard the big guy rush after me. Jack Stevens barely had time to stand up before I hugged him and whispered in his ear, "Oh, honey, this man is so terrible." "I'm sorry, sir. She's very fast and—" "It's okay, Bobby. She's with me." Jack Stevens's eyes sparkled. "Are you okay, my princess?" Maybe I smiled. That smile was a distant memory. My Jack was broken. That first day spent at his bedside, holding his lifeless hand, was the first of many. I had a lot of time to reflect on my actions, drown in my guilt, and curse myself for my indescribable stupidity. The consequences of my actions will be felt for centuries and will change fate. What has been done cannot be undone. The pain may heal, but the scars will remain. I pressed my cold, limp hand to my cheek and cried bitterly for my loving husband. Jack Stevens. 5 years, 8 months, and 22 days later. May 6th, 2003. Light. A strange and eerie feeling suddenly came over me. A feeling of déjà vu rushed through my melted brain as if I had seen it before. The darkness transformed like the dawn coming on the darkest of nights. I remembered the dream at that moment and what that feeling once was and what it meant. Sleep, closing my day, surrendering to the soft emptiness and random sleep. But this dream seemed endless. When this strange semblance of light began to approach my horizon, my memory began to return. In this brief reflection of the past, I introduced my princess. She was in my arms, hugging me and seeking my protection. The concierge looked puzzled as I hugged her and nodded, confirming that she was mine and that everything was fine. And indeed, everything was fine. I sat at the bar, lost in my own shortcomings. Despite my wealth and luck, approaching a woman felt like the Apollo 13 mission to the moon. I would circle around my supposed goal, with all systems on the verge of failure, never demonstrating my potential. To love a woman or care for a woman. Internally, I was broken, and dwelling was the maximum I could achieve, plunging into the dark side with every failed attempt. Communication eluded me, and worst of all, my equipment was broken, destroying any possible confidence in achieving my goal. I was unlucky enough to get cancer as a teenager. A subsequent operation left me half capable of ever producing an heir, but when subsequent tests showed that this was impossible, showing a null result, I retreated into my comfortable shell of shortcomings, considering myself less than a man. Approaching girls was unthinkable, and every time I managed to be in the presence of one, I retreated back into my shell, thinking that I could never allow a woman with misfortune to know me, let alone love me. Then my princess ran into my arms that fateful day, and everything changed. "Are you okay? Did that big man scare you?" Yes, it was alcohol, but her perfume and feminine scent overwhelmed me. God, she smelled so feminine. The lunar module separated and began its descent. She stepped back and blinked. Eyelashes the color of autumn flashed with sparkling emeralds. Their depth was oceanic. "No, he's a big teddy bear." She looked over her shoulder at the departing giant. "Thanks for not giving me away. Can I buy you a drink?" She smiled, and her face became brighter than the dawn. I laughed. That should have been my line. I invited the bartender, inviting this stunning beauty to order. "I'd like blurred pleasure, please." She grinned and winked. "What the— so, princess?" I asked curiously. "There are a lot of other rich guys here, and some of them are pretty good looking. A girl like you could attract anyone." I took the JD, more in an attempt to hide my excitement than my desire to drink it. "Why did you choose me?" "Okay, so have you figured me out, mister? Do you think I'm some kind of slutty woman of easy virtue who wants to grab a rich man and maybe pick his pockets?" She looked disappointed, which surprised me. God, she was intoxicatingly beautiful. "I admit that I would like the company of a man, but if you think that I am looking for more than just intelligent and pleasant conversation, then you have completely mistaken me." This statement was spoken with feeling and what I could only define as sincerity. Those amazing eyes studied mine. "Yes, I admit that I would like to meet a rich man and live happily ever after." What girl doesn't dream of that? I'm just a poor, simple girl after all. But any man I intend to spend my life with must be smart, interesting, caring, and loyal. Being rich would certainly be the icing on the cake, but all these other qualities are of paramount importance. She paused to catch her breath. I was frozen, mesmerized. So, Mr. Jack Stevens, if you don't meet any of these requirements and aren't looking for an intelligent conversation, tell me now and let's not waste each other's time. She crossed her arms under her magnificent breasts and sighed. God, how I loved determined women. This girl was driving me crazy. Her purple hazy vodka cocktail arrived, complete with a silly umbrella and a lone strawberry floating on a creamy foam on top. Well, that's been stated. Perhaps I should introduce myself. I'm Jack Stevens, but I think you already know that, miss. I paused, giving her the opportunity. She smiled from behind that damn umbrella. Nice to meet you, Mr. Stevens. I'm Jillian Tomlinson, but everyone calls me Jill. She put down the drink and extended her hand, her eyelids flickering, knowing we had already embraced, but still offering her hand. I took her offer and stupidly turned her hand over and kissed the back of her wrist. You're Jack and I'm Jill. She laughed, and that was all. I was caught, hauled ashore, and definitely ready to be butchered. Memories of my girl laughing and reclining my gorgeous hair behind my ears as we talked for hours is still etched in my memory, but strangely little else. This memory of our first meeting and that glorious night spent on the mezzanine is still fresh and seems to have become fresher, as if my brain was holding on to it, returning to that night again and again, as if this memory was the key to this darkness. But the darkness dissipated. Light appeared. I heard a sound, and it was a sound I barely recognized, the sound of a human voice. Like some foreign language, it penetrated my hazy consciousness. The sound continued in its rhythmic repetition, and awareness finally dawned. Jack, Jack, can you hear me, Jack? Jack, Jack, can you hear me, Jack? It made sense. I was Jack, and someone was calling me. Then the face I had first mistaken for an angelic one materialized, and my preconceived notion of a fluffy white angel turned into a clear vision of shiny black perfection. This angel outshone the picture book angels. Why are angels depicted as white Caucasian blondes? My confession that the one who was now shaking me and calling me was a beautiful black woman with long curly black hair framing her smiling face. Oh my God, you're awake, I'll call the doctor. The dark angel has disappeared. I recognized the sounds as words, but I had difficulty understanding their meaning. The light was unbearable, and my mind hurt. The darkness enveloped me again, but I could still hear the sounds. The other voice sounded firm and instructive, while the angel's voice bordered on hysteria. Strange sensations seemed to poke and kick at the edges of my world as a deep voice demanded obedience. Thinking back on that period of inactivity, I now realized that I was experiencing the pain and confusion of waking up from a deep and analgesic sleep. The sensations slowly returned, conscious memory and understanding seeping back into my mind like slow-moving, all-encompassing molasses. My brain sparkled again as life returned. My angel's name was Katie. She was a dark-skinned beauty in white, wearing a St. Augustine memorial uniform. Her magnificent teeth blinded me, but her smile radiates warmth. Large brown eyes studied me carefully. Katie fussed and cared with excitement, explaining that I had been asleep for almost 6 years. The news was almost incomprehensible. Kathy explained that I had fallen down the stairs in my house and hit my head, or rather my neck, damaging the reticular activating system. Apparently, the RAS is responsible for consciousness and awakening the body from sleep. My system was damaged, along with further damage to my spinal column. The doctor said my lower body was permanently paralyzed. From the hips down, kaput. In any case, it took 3 months to restore any semblance of functionality. It took almost a week and almost constant tears to sink into the reality that I had missed almost 6 years of my life, or at least 6 years of everyone else's life. 3 days later, after that first return to the world that had left me behind, a similar angelic presence seemed to study me, only this one had porcelain skin, and it had an aura of shiny red hair framing and surrounding her flawless face. glossy red lips whispered things I didn't understand, and deep green cat-like eyes looked at me with curiosity. It took time, but that image became my wife, and when the realization came, I cried and tried to hug her, desperate to feel her touch and breathe in her essence. Some memories eventually returned, and I remembered her smiling face and those sparkling eyes shining from beneath the lace veil, signaling her joy and utter happiness. Our wedding day was the happiest time of my life, without a doubt. Looking back, I realized that our union worked well, like two pieces of a puzzle discovered by chance and found to fit together. Jill freely admits that she was looking for hunted, which would be a more accurate description of a rich husband, someone above his station, as they say. Her own family was poor, barely middle class, and broken. Her parents divorced when she was 5, and she hasn't seen her father in over 10 years. On the other hand, I also outweighed my weight class. I knew I was simple, and of course this magnificent creature could have her pick of any man on the planet. But as she kept repeating, she wanted a loving, caring, faithful man, and of course he had to be rich. She was not at all ashamed to admit it, and I respected her for being so frank. Jill was a smart woman, so conversation and common interests were paramount. We dated for almost a year, 6 months of which we were engaged. Yes, we just suited each other. Before I proposed, I reluctantly admitted to my problem with dysfunctional plumbing. Don't get me wrong, I can have sex, but we will probably never be able to have children of our own. Jill simply shrugged, saying she wasn't really into kids, but I could tell she was disappointed. We got married privately and spent 3 wonderful years together. I worshipped my wife, and the way her eyes lit up every time she saw me confirmed that she loved me too. Although my work took up valuable time, we still spent quality time together, and Jill was busy setting up our new home, a modern 6-room mansion with security on the North Coast. She organized landscapers and workers who transformed the area to her design and installed a stunning infinity pool. Jill was a natural when it came to decorating and transforming the mansion, and within a year of purchasing the property, the place was spectacular. I was constantly in awe of her abilities, and my beautiful princess beamed with pride and satisfaction. She had built a nest and now seemed content. 2 months spent waking up and adjusting meant we talked a lot, reminiscing about fun times, including our first meeting. The intricacies of that night are still imprinted like carved stone tablets in my memory. The last conversation we had, there in my hospital room, was also set in stone. Jill stood demurely next to my best friend Carl, and both of the people closest to me looked nervous and uneasy. I was afraid of what was going to happen. My best friend Carl and I were complete opposites. We were friends from school onwards. Carl befriended me when I offered him protection money to protect himself from bullies who seemed to take pleasure in finding someone weaker than themselves, a spoiled little rich kid dressed impeccably and brought to school in a limousine with a driver. Carl was the son of Swedish immigrants, and his father built a profitable construction company, the profits from which helped send their child to an expensive private school. Carl actually refused to accept my protection money when we went to college, insisting that I help him with his studies instead. The problem was that the guy was so passionate about his football that he didn't go to classes at all, so help became unnecessary. He dropped out of school and went to work for his father, eventually getting fired for laziness, foolishly thinking and believing that his father would give him a free ride. His dad worked hard for everything he had and expected the same from his son. Carl started his own business as a building contractor, but struggled due to a lack of work discipline and focus. I introduced him to Jill before our marriage and invited him to be best man, which he happily accepted. My wife has hired him many times to build a cabana, pool locker rooms, and a very elaborate alfresco and BBQ area. I admit that he did a great job and Jill was very pleased with the result. I saw him several times, sitting quietly by my hospital bed, seemingly examining every piece of plastic tubing, blinking monitors, and array of writing devices, everyone, except me, or at least my eyes. So on this day, Jill was wearing a blouse and jeans, and her long, toned legs appeared to be dyed blue denim. Her body was toned and perfect, as if she had been following a strict exercise regimen for the past 5 years. However, her breathing seemed strained, a little strained and slightly raspy. But what made me painfully swallow huge lumps of foul air was the fact that their hands were clasped, their fingers intertwined. "Oh my God, Jack, honey, we have something to tell you." I noticed her knuckles turn white as she tightened her grip on the big man's hand. "The doctors said you'd never recover. I was so lonely and depressed, and Carl was there to comfort me." A tear slid lazily down her cheek, and Jill brushed it away in exasperation. "We've been together for over 5 years, and—" Even more clasping of hands. I could only nod stupidly. What could I say, and how should I react to the recognition that the wife I adore, the girl I worship, has been with my best friend for 5 years? She continued quietly. "We fell in love, and—" More tears flowed down those beautiful cheeks. I felt dizzy. Carl coughed, as if on cue. "Jack, I consider you my best friend, but like Jilly said, we thought you were dead, man." He paused, giving me a chance to process Gilly as a term of endearment. "We have 2 daughters, Jack, 2 beautiful little girls." My world began to darken. Jess is 4 years old and Jade is almost 2. They would love to meet you, but first, we wanted you to understand the situation. I was stunned, desperately fighting off the thick black curtain eclipsing the world. "Jack, we thought you'd never get better, and I'm so sorry, but we had to move on." Jill sounded terribly remorseful, but Carl sounded so smug. "Jilly, seriously, I had no choice in terms of moving forward. I was in the hospital imitating a vegetable for almost 6 years while the people closest to me moved on. I counted. She waited about 6 months before getting pregnant. How long did it take before she found solace in Carl's bed? I bent down, grabbed the jug of water, and tore it out. At least my guts were working. And all Carl said was, "Oh damn, that's just gross, man." "Jillian," I cried. He seemed lifeless. Only the monitors said otherwise. Cold machine pumped air into my man's throat, and wires and sensors transmitted signals to other, equally distant machines that continuously beeps and clicked. My hand rested on his, but he was cold and lifeless. Doctors deliberately lowered Jack's core body temperature in a desperate attempt to deal with his injuries, which turned out to be minor. Some swelling and bruising on the back of his neck and a few minor abrasions, but that's it. And yet my poor husband lies in front of me, unresponsive and devoid of life. Doctors say he may never recover. Some kind of damage that affected his ability to wake up occurred to his neck and spine. The coma can last for days, weeks, months, or even, in the worst-case scenario, indefinitely. He may simply fall into a vegetative state, forever dependent on others to care for him. This great mind, this caring and gentle man, reduced to nothing more than a piece of barely functioning human flesh. I cried almost hysterically. What have I done? Less than a few weeks after I first met Jack, he introduced me to his best friend, Carl. The huge blonde Viking took my breath away and made me light up, where it would be inappropriate to light up when appraising another man. This guy was Thor mixed with Hercules. I've never seen 2 friends so magnetically opposite. "Jill, this is my friend Carl Klum. Carl, this is my girlfriend Jillian Tomlinson." Jack smiled at my stunned surprise. My eyes darted between the 2 men. Nice to meet you, Carl." I extended my hand, but Carl put his arm around me, and the giant crushed me halfway, kissing my cheek as I gasped. "Hey, beautiful. Wow, how the hell did my boyfriend find you?" He grinned, appraising me, and turned to Jack. I was still coming to my senses. "Damn, man, were you at the Miss World pageant and kidnapped a contestant?" Another deep laugh coincided with my blush. Carl turned around again and shamelessly assessed me again. The little black dress was slightly out of place, and I knew I was falling out of the neckline a little. Perhaps the hemline could have been lower given the circumstances. Suddenly I felt naked, and yet I had never felt naked in front of Jack. This was new. The other problem was that even in my heels, I was still half a head shorter than this blonde bodybuilder, which somehow reduced my normal height. Excellence over men. I felt small and a little insignificant. He shamelessly continued to examine my body. "Oh my God, you're hot. So how the hell did my boyfriend find you, honey?" "Oh, for God's sake, Carl, take it easy. You just met her." Jack sounded annoyed. I snuggled up to my boyfriend. Jack always made me feel comfortable. With him, I was eye candy, and Jack seemed to love it. He liked to hold my hand, showing me off quietly and proudly, as if he was publicly declaring, "Hey guys, see? It's all mine." But at that moment of meeting Carl, I felt insignificant, naked, and vulnerable. "Do you use that phrase on all the girls?" I tried to be brave. "No, baby, no girl I've been with looked like you." His eyes looked over me again, taking me in. I felt naked. Jack has always been a lucky guy, and I think I hate him now. I'm jealous, of course. He laughed, cheekily took my arm, and announced that it was time to go eat. This is Carl. He is cocky, self-confident, and completely devoid of decorum. His dominant aggressiveness excited me. During this first dinner, Jack barely had time to get a word in edgewise because Carl and I were talking non-stop, spitting out continuous hints that balanced on flirtation but did not reach sex. I enjoyed discussing art, politics, and world events with Jack, but 90 minutes of idle chit-chat with Carl was refreshing and exciting. I apologized to Jack later, but he simply brushed it off and said that he enjoyed my interaction with Carl as much as I did. He confirmed that Carl was not shy and was a cheeky bastard, but he laughed many times when I put him in his place. "You really showed him where he belongs, Jill. He'll never take you for granted again. I enjoyed watching you act." He smiled and stroked me as he drove. I trembled all over and didn't know which man caused this reaction, having my boyfriend sit coy while I crossed paths with his best friend, a guy who in another life might have been Zeus. It was amazingly intoxicating. The fact that Zeus looked at me like the goddess Diana was even more exciting. Talking complete nonsense was enlightening. The result was, I was excited as hell, and I really needed it. So that's how it was. That night, I finally took Jack to bed, and yes, I was in charge. That's why my man didn't have the confidence to lead. It soon became apparent that he lacked experience, not that I had opened up to a lot of guys in college, but I was dipping my toes in the water, so to speak. Okay, maybe I swam, but I'm not a woman of easy virtue. I suspected that Jack might not have had any women before me, but I didn't insist on it. It was that night that I learned the reason for Jack's insecurity. Scar told me a story that he shouldn't have shared, but of course he did. But it was only a week before he proposed that he nervously revealed his inability to become a father. Of course, I asked myself this question, but decided to wait until it revealed itself. I was afraid of reality, knowing how much I wanted to be a mother one day. I tried to appear calm, but internally I was wincing. I loved this man, and there were other ways to become a mother and have a family. I hugged him tightly and reassured him that it was no problem. Unsurprisingly, he proposed the following week on Friday. I cried and screamed yes, opened the little Cartier box, put on the ring, and pounced on it. I was supposed to be Mrs. Jack Stevens. Carl was invited to be the best man, and this made me feel anxious and uneasy. By that time, our acquaintance was easy, but teetering on the edge of inadmissibility, especially when Jack was not around. One evening, we were supposed to meet Carl and his new girlfriend at a club. I was extremely jealous when I found out that Carl had committed to a girl on a permanent basis because he had been single the entire time I knew him, even though it was no secret that he probably went to bed with different women every night. He always mentioned some girl, briefly describing some of her advantages, or, conversely, some shortcomings. He was a walking commentator on women, which I found fascinating. Superficial, but fascinating. This can only be explained by how smart women get caught up in stupid gossip talk. I think all women are cursed with a desire to compare and explore, to judge the competition and mock their weaknesses. In any case, Carl came alone, claiming that his girlfriend did not come. So I was shared and danced with both men, although mostly with Carl. Jack simply shrugged, assuming that Carl was a better dancer, which was true, and fitter, which was also true. Of course, Carl was flirting and holding me too close. The dress was tight, short, and backless, with built-in support, so I was braless. I'm sure Jack was watching us. Interestingly, I hardly resisted. My body was alive and trembling. Carl, Jack must be watching. My reproach only emboldened him. He pulled me closer, whispering in my ear. His breath seemed intoxicating. His masculine scent was dizzyingly strong. You love it, baby, and so does our Jack. I didn't try to escape, which I think confirmed his observation. He was right. I loved showing off in front of Jack, and being cheeky and flirty stirred my cauldron to the limit. Oh God, I tried to recover. You're so arrogant, big boy. What do you really know about me? I tried not to sound too shrill. I know you'll love it. He grinned and pulled me towards him. You're confident, big boy. I tried to grin, but I think I blushed. God, what did I say? Is this a challenge, baby? He chuckled, and I trembled. At that moment, I realized that it was only a matter of time before I gave myself to this big, smug, blonde, self-confident dork. Jack never said anything about his friend's actions when we got home, and his reaction in the bedroom after my little show that night spoke volumes. He was great, and it was probably the best sex we had ever had, and, as it turned out, we would ever have. Carl had my phone number and my email address. His flirting texts and hints were relentless. I carefully deleted all the messages I sent and received, but I took the bait, and it was only a matter of time before I was caught. Calling Jack 3 weeks before our wedding, explaining that I wouldn't be home when he got home from work, because I was meeting an old college friend for dinner, was, of course, a complete and deceptive fabrication. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew exactly what would happen. Carl wore me out. I only had to be with him once before I married my soulmate and settled into a life of boring contentment and stability. Satisfaction, because that's what I wanted, right? Stability, money, a loving relationship, and a husband who would worship me and never leave me. So what did I do? That question hammered through my mind over and over again as I entered the hotel, pressed the elevator button, and ascended to room 335, the suite reserved by my fiancé's best friend, the man who would soon be having sex with me. I was shaking with a mixture of anticipation, fear, and unspeakable guilt. Now I use the term having sex because that's how I justified my lust. I loved Jack, and I made love to him. It was more than just sex. I would finish this tonight and move on and try the forbidden apple. I knocked on the door, perhaps more softly than I intended. My breathing stopped, and I felt dizzy, and my body began to tremble in response. I heard heavy footsteps and the click of the lock. I sucked in a shaky breath, barely preventing myself from fainting. "Hey, sexy girl, are you ready?" He grinned, and his teeth flashed like in a movie. I stood there, swaying on my feet, refusing to cooperate with my strong internal orders to run. I was weak, and worse, I was lost. When I finally returned home that night, I nearly collapsed. I don't even remember how I got home. My brain was on autopilot. Jack sat in his favorite chair, twirling a glass of whiskey in his hands. "Hey, honey, how was your evening with your friends?" He looked tired. "Okay, thanks, honey." I tried to straighten up and look less like a duck. "I need to go to the toilet urgently. I'll be back soon." Of course, I've never experienced sex like this. Not even close. I felt terribly guilty, but I accept that I am only a mortal and, like other mortals, I have my weaknesses, addictions, and needs. Now I am addicted to mind-blowing sex. In my defense, my body was made for this, and my essence craved it, and one big man had now awakened that need. I was hooked and knew there was no turning back from that point on. I'm not bitchy, at least I hope I won't be judged as such. I loved my future husband more than life itself, but there was one thing he could never give me, and to satisfy that need, I would always look for a dominant lover who could give me that need. Why I could not resist this desire to satisfy my burning need, I cannot explain, and indeed, I cannot justify my failure. Why does anyone with addiction continue on a path of self-destruction? What I knew was that if I was caught cheating, Jack would fire me. So why did I date Carl 3 more times before we got married, and why, for God's sake, did I slip something into my new husband's drink on our wedding night? and leave him on the floor while my lover officiates my wedding. Oh God, forgive me. So the guilt consumes me as I stare at the lifeless body in front of me. It's entirely my fault. I started the wheel of disaster, and fate has now fulfilled it. Carl. The first time I saw her, I was amazed. How the hell did that weakling Jack win her? Damn it, boy. She was incredibly beautiful. Tall, slender, like a gazelle, and built like a star, only magnificent. She was obviously looking for his money. There could be no other reason. Her miniskirt barely covered her butt and those breasts. Jack introduced her, and I may have sounded rude, but, well, my God. She looked at Jack, seeking some kind of consolation, and I noticed her amazing eyes. These brilliant emeralds sought his protection. I saw something else in those eyes. There was playfulness and modesty born of submission, and yet emitted force. I could see that she loved him, but she left the door ajar, and the chain of security seemed fragile. I might be considered a heartless bastard, but that's life. In any case, I will soon pick up this beauty from my old friend. I truly considered him a friend, even though I didn't have time for friends. My acquaintances were mostly made up of angry husbands, boyfriends, and stunned idiots wondering why their girlfriends, wives, and fiancés cheated. Maybe good old Jack will join the line, the angry line of confused men who would really like to get rid of me. But I really loved this guy, and I was terribly jealous of him. He was too smart and too kind. Maybe we could arrange something, some kind of agreement or something like that. Of course, I had a full address book of phone numbers ready to satisfy me. This disease of mine, if that is the correct term, has caused me to wander for many years. My father kicked me out of the house, and I think that bitch Mary Jane, his secretary, had something to do with it. Dear Dad found out that I slept with her, and that was the end. I had a feeling that she was sleeping with him too, but I wasn't sure. I'm the same age as Jack, and seeing him with a beautiful girl ready to settle down made me scratch my head. Maybe it's time for me to calm down, because no matter how many women of easy virtue I had, there was no satisfaction. It seemed like I needed something more, someone more permanent, and someone more interesting. Jill was amazing, smart, sweet, and my favorite thing about her. She was modestly shy around me in private. I discovered this on several occasions when Jack left us to get drinks or go to the bathroom. I would tease her or say something sexual, and she would get all giggly and turn away, embarrassed. Of course, I gradually took more and more liberties. She complained that her future husband might be seeing us, but she never pushed me away or slapped me. I knew she was mine. Wimpy Jack has lost his girlfriend. The nagging and relentless sex letters wore her out. Hey baby, you look sexy today. As you know, you can't see what I'm wearing. I just know because you always want to look good for me. Not only for you, and for Jack too. And for me. Yes. Yes. Take them off. I don't like you wearing them. Why? Since I said so, now do as you are told. Are you kidding? I never joke. Did you do that? Yes. Good girl, no panties today. Let's talk later. Small conversations like this kept her on edge. Waiting was key. Patience and constant nudging eventually brought her to me. Of course, my plan worked, and when I heard a knock on the hotel room door, my heart smiled and my smile pulsed. Well, anyway, you get my point. That night, I was sure that there would never be a woman like her again. Ever. I found one in a trillion, but it scared me because for the first time in my life, I realized that I felt less than a woman. That doesn't mean I showed it. I treated her exactly the way she wanted, and she loved it. But I was amazed. She owned me. This was our third meeting at the hotel. So I'm getting married next week, and I guess that's it, she pouted. The fact that she asked it as a question made me smirk. No, baby, I will never give you up. If I had my way, I would stop the wedding, but I know how much Jack means to you. In fact, I wasn't sure at all. I knew she kind of loved him, and she had previously tried to explain that her love for him had nothing to do with her having sex with me. Now I knew firsthand what it was like to have meaningless sex for the sake of simple satisfaction and pleasure, but for me everything had changed. I was in love. For the first time in my life, I experienced real feelings for a woman. Maybe I'm getting old, getting soft. Whatever the reason, this woman brought down the walls of my fortress and demanded entry. I won't let you marry him. I'll kidnap you, keep you in prison, and have sex with you, you fool, every day. Jill laughed and kissed him. That sounds pretty attractive. But I'll marry Jack, and that'll be the end of it. So, baby, what are we going to do? It was very obvious that my girlfriend wanted this to continue. But how? Well, first of all, I will let you marry a weakling, but you will have to pay a fine. She grinned. So, love, what a punishment. I like punishments, she whispered. The punishment is, first you have to have sex with me on your wedding night. Shock ripped the grin from her face. My own smile hurts. You're joking, right? Her. But how? Sleeping pills. I happen to have some. I'll put it in his drink, and he'll sleep like a baby all night. Oh, do you really think this will work? She looked up from under her chestnut lashes, and I saw a twinkle reflected in those startling green eyes, although masked by her expression of false terror. Jill giggled and went to work. As soon as I slipped the crushed pills into Jack's drink, I told him to prepare it, announcing that his new wife was waiting for him upstairs. Jack looked a little distraught and a little upset, as if he wasn't sure if he'd live up to expectations. He had already drunk too much, and I seriously doubted his ability to do the job. I chuckled internally. Don't worry, old friend, your beloved wife will not be disappointed. At Jill's insistence, we spent 10 minutes at the bar, figuring she needed some time to freshen up and get ready to meet her lover. At least that's what Jack thought. At that moment, she was really preparing for a lover, only I was the lover. She was given strict instructions to remain in her wedding dress and wedding attire, put her veil back on, and remove her silk panties. Jack started to feel empty, so I hugged him and literally dragged him into the room. Yes, he's already had a lot to drink this evening. Jill greeted us at the door and looked absolutely stunning in white lace. I laid him on the pillows, and Jill covered him with a blanket and kissed him tenderly on the forehead, whispering that she loved him. And I admit that there was nothing in her behavior except pure love. But she needed sex, and her desire won out. She stood up, turned to me, and smiled nervously. She seemed uncomfortable, and to overcome her anxiety, she tried to act lighthearted. Well, my love, you are accepting this bride in order to. But that was all she had time to say before I shouted, I agree, we had sex. My nurse smiled a smile that spoke of real caring. It wasn't a fake plastic smile like people pretend to be nice. No, her smile radiated a warmth that spoke of true friendship. I learned that Katie had been my caregiver for 3 years since she started working at the hospice. Of course, others took over her shifts, but Katie was my primary day nurse, and along with another patient, I was her primary charge. It was her angelic face that I first saw when I tried to return to this world, a world that left me behind. Katie was beautiful, radiant, and dark as deep green jade. She wore her hair tied up tightly, but I could imagine what she would look like with those tight curls cascading over her slender shoulders. This beautiful creature took care of me twice a day, every day throughout her work. I didn't understand how she could enjoy washing vegetables as much as I did, but she just giggled. Maybe I like to touch you and see if your body reacts to my touch. She smiled. It responded, and that's why I knew you weren't lost. I felt a sensation and shuddered. More attention followed her grin. I lived every day expecting you to wake up and smile at me, and you did. Her expression became wooden. But now I'm sad because you'll be coming home soon and I'll lose you. You've been a part of my life for so long now. A tear rolled out from under one of those long black eyelashes. She squeezed my hand and I tried to smile, but I wanted to cry with her. I didn't really know this angel, but I realized at that moment that she had been my guardian for many years, and although I had only just physically met her, I had known her spirit for a very long time. We were unwittingly connected. Katie was part of who I was now, and that thought made me very sad. I should have been thrilled to be coming home, but instead I squeezed her hand tightly and blinked back my own tears. Thank you, beautiful, for taking care of me and believing in me. Large tears rolled lazily down her shiny dark cheeks. "Hey, please, I was just doing my job." She tried to smile. Her teeth were amazing, so white and perfect. Of course, her statement was complete nonsense. Simply doing the work does not include the deep faith and love that she clearly showed me on a daily and constant basis. This, of course, was not part of her job description. No, this beautiful creature was someone very special. Needless to say, 2 weeks after returning home, a taxi stopped at the entrance. Jill wheeled my wheelchair out onto the porch, and together we watched Katie struggle with heavy suitcases up the steps, beaming with joy. I assumed she was 25 years old, although it was difficult to tell. She was out of shape that day, and her light summer dress emphasized her beautiful figure. She looked so innocently young. By I'd say 5'4". Her butt was a little full and her breasts a little smaller than needed, but the overall package was perfect. Her hair was loose and a light breeze blew through her tight curls. Long chocolate brown legs moved in white sandals as she pulled luggage. "Hello, Angel." My smile stretched across my cheeks. She dropped her suitcases, jumped forward, and hugged me, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. "Hi, Mr. Stevens, Mrs. Stevens. It's so great to be here." Katie seemed stupidly excited and was about to shake Jill's hand, but my wife pulled her in for a hug and a pat on the back. "This house is absolutely amazing." Her eyes darted around, waiting. "It's great to see you here, Katie. My husband really appreciates all your efforts in restoring him. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, too." They kissed on the cheeks, and I felt their connection. Incredibly, I had two wonderful women who cared for me, even though I was a broken creature and now practically useless. Katie's presence would free Jill from the routine duties of caring for me, washing me, and helping me with my toilet needs. The day I left the hospice, I asked Kathy if she would like to be my full-time nurse and offered a huge amount of money to entice her to become my home nurse, and then crossed my fingers. She didn't hesitate, screamed yes, and handed in my resignation the same day I was wheeled out in my new wheelchair to finally go home and resume my interrupted life. Almost nothing had changed at home, except that there were now 3 other people living here. Yes, I accepted that my wife slept with another man in my absence, and that their union produced 2 beautiful children. This man turned out to be my best friend, a man I had known since childhood. Of course, my memories and thoughts were still scattered to the wind, but I vaguely remember Carl from the time of our marriage. I remembered him as being a bit loud, opinionated, and charismatic. The same man was now very quiet and reserved. I suspected that I was hiding something, but we didn't talk much. Carl was currently working on a project in another state and had been away for 2 days. I saw Jill kiss him goodbye, and watching them hug gave me strange feelings. Yes, there was the expected jealousy, but there was also something else that scared me. This worried me, and this strange feeling of déjà vu came over me again. When I returned home, Jill had set up a special bedroom with railings, a crane, and special equipment in the basement that had recently been converted into an office. Carl built a large attached open bathroom, so I now had a self-contained living and sleeping area. But the elephant in the room remained. Jill, of course, introduced me to her children at the hospice, and I can't describe how strange it was to shake hands with my wife's beautiful children. The eldest, Jessica, is almost 5 years old and blonde with blue eyes like Carl, while the youngest, Jade, is red-haired and green-eyed like her mother, only her eyes were very dark green and her hair is not as red, more strawberry blonde. Everything in her appearance said that this girl would one day become as beautiful as her mother. They were both ideal feminine creatures, and in some self-destructive way I was glad they weren't like me. But what did all this mean for my marriage? The situation was difficult. Jill happily signed the prenup, knowing that circumstances change and marriages end. She argued that this was correct, considering that half of my wealth was family wealth, and as she laughed playfully, she was a self-proclaimed fortune hunter. I knew that she loved me, there was no doubt about it, but she was also a realist. Thus, in the event of my accidental or natural death, my fortune passed to my heir, or, in his absence, to my younger brother, who hated me. Being second in line was never pleasant for him and completely unacceptable. My parents both died of cancer in their 60s, within a year of each other. They got married late, and Dad was 40 when I was born. My only brother, Ben, visited me only once in the hospital, when I was in a coma. Katie said his visit was short, and that he only asked one question. Will he live? He was a scavenger, circling the body. I'm glad Katie was there at the time because I was afraid he would take me off life support. A written application was submitted by him asking him to allow me to die peacefully and to turn off my machine. Jill vehemently rejected this suggestion, claiming that I was breathing naturally. This claim was disputed, and my machine was temporarily turned off. Thank God my lungs continued to breathe and my brain responded to my will to live, so I lived another day. That didn't stop my greedy brother from further trying to get me cut off through the medical board. Damn bastard. In any case, the prenuptial agreement provided that in the event of my accidental death, Jill would receive a generous benefit of $1 million per year for life. It was nothing really, and at least she would have survived, but she wouldn't have lived in that mansion or driven an Aston Martin Vanquish. If we had children, the full inheritance would go to the boy at the age of 21, and in the case of only girls, at 30 for the eldest. Of course, you remember that I was told that I couldn't have children, so my brother or his eldest son would probably be the final beneficiaries, if I died of old age or something. I'm sure my caring brother and his piranha family were all rubbing their hands in anticipation of the news of my death. I think I ruined their party, at least for a while. So what about the current problem? I woke up from a coma after almost 6 years, and my wife and my best friend are partners and have 2 beautiful girls. They apparently sleep together upstairs in what was once our bedroom, and in what was once our marital bed. The woman I worshipped was no longer mine alone, and that knowledge tore at my heart. But I was realistic. What would I do in such circumstances? All the medical reports said that I would never wake up and at best would remain vegetative. Jill never intended to divorce me, and that reality was not based on the loss of her fortune. It was because she loved me and would never leave me. But she had needs, like all people. She longed for company and love. She needed to communicate and feel needed, and she had desires that everyone has. As an almost lifeless plant, I could not satisfy any of these needs. So she turned to our friend, and he took over my duties. He cared for my wife, watched over her, and ultimately fell in love with her. How could I judge this negatively? It was right. Now, around me, they were acting strange, unsure of how the new dynamic of me coming home would work. I tried to ignore it and pretend not to notice, but when they kissed out of habit and then realized that I was watching, they retreated nervously and touched each other only lightly. Jill was affectionate and caring around me, but the cheerfulness she had was no longer there. I was a third wheel on a bicycle, with no real benefit and clearly unnecessary. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and one evening after Jess and Jade had been tucked into bed with the promise of a bedtime story from Uncle Jack, I called an adult meeting. Yes, I was Uncle Jack, although I was still Mom's husband. It was difficult, but the situation had to be resolved. Oh, and the girls always squealed with delight when good old Uncle Jack's bedtime story was announced because I twisted the stories and added my own unique twists, always offering a surprising new ending. It's time D-Day. I wheeled my wheelchair into the middle of the room, clapped my hands, and called a meeting. Both looked around, nervous and avoiding holding hands. They knew what was coming, and their nerves were on edge. So, I'm sick and tired of you two acting guilty and anxious. Why can't you both act normal around me? I understand the circumstances, and I'm not judging you. You both should have moved on, so what's the problem? I looked at both lovers and tried to smile. Perhaps it wasn't convincing. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. We were told you'd never recover. Jill rushed over to my wheelchair and hugged me. We didn't mean to offend you. Hey, I'm not offended. Do you still love me? I held her hand a little timidly. Of course I do, but... SHH, do you love Carl? Yes. Her confession was barely audible. Do you love your children? Yes. This confirmation sounded firmer. So what's the problem? Sit on Carl's lap and hug the poor guy. Jill smiled and brushed away a tear. She walked over to her lover and sat on his lap, his large arms wrapped around her. That's better, I remarked. What do we do next? Divorce? Will that allow you both to move on? Maybe I said something wrong because Jill burst into tears. Carl pulled out a large checkered scarf and offered it to his girlfriend. Sorry, Jack, but that's the only thing she doesn't want, Carl muttered, looking upset. Why, because of the marriage contract? Damn, that comment brought out loud sobs. Carl continued. No, Jack, she was never worried about the marriage contract. Jill always wanted to be Mrs. Jack Stevens. My wife nodded furiously. I'm just a lover for her, an insignificant lover. This last statement was barely uttered when another fit of sobbing began. Jill hit Carl on the top of his arm as if she was angry, even more wiping with a handkerchief and blowing his nose. My confrontation was not going according to plan. I love you too, you big fool. More nose blowing. I tried a different approach. Okay. What if we continue as is? I paused. Jill and I are married, but my wife has an affair. So what? We live in new times. Blended families are the norm, but we need to decide what the children will call us and how to move on without guilt and secrecy. Jill calmed down and looked at me with big red eyes that blinked occasionally. You two will continue as you have been doing for the last 6 years, as if I'm not here. For my part, I'll get used to seeing you both at ease and natural around me. If I don't see you kissing and hugging, everything is canceled, because I will file for divorce if this is the only way to bring you both back together. I chuckled, trying to soften the threat, but hoped there was enough conviction in my tone to revive their union. I continued. Now I will call the children my adopted children. We will have a mixed marriage, only in our case the ex, that is you, Carl, will live with us for the sake of the children. No one must know that you two are intimate and sleep together. Carl, you will always be a dad to the girls, and I'm glad they call me daddy or uncle or whatever you two decide and are comfortable with. I shrugged as Jill pulled free and walked back to me, her gratitude evident in her smile. Thank you, my handsome and understanding husband. This idea sounds great. Jill sat on my lap and kissed my lips briefly. I inhaled her scent. God, how I missed her. So, can I kiss my lover? She smiled at my confusion. I nodded stupidly. Do you mind if he touches me? Intimately? Another stupid nod. Only this time I understood the game. Do you mind if my lover sees me naked? Ha. What if we make love? She smiled. Yes. You know, I'll sleep in my lover's bed at night, and he won't spare me, darling, and I can be noisy. These images made me feel dizzy. But you like the idea, don't you? I tried to answer like a normal man, but I felt dizzy. My wife grinned. Okay, Carl and I will try to move forward, but if things get too hard and stressful, you have to say something. Let's all find a safe word to use when things get too tense or weird. How about a redes? That's it. Easy to remember. It's stop in French. Just think stop and remember the French translation. If anyone ever says this word, we will immediately stop whatever we are doing and discuss the problem, even if in public, we will go to a private place and talk. Yeah, sounds good. Jill quickly kissed me again, returned to Carl, and pulled him to his feet. They kissed. Finally, Jill turned to me as if checking my well-being. I smiled and raised my glass in greeting. She smiled back. We sat and talked late into the night, discussing events that I had missed, both on the local scene and around the world, including the horrors of September 11th, 2001, which, fortunately, I did not witness with my own eyes. Finally, Jill took me to my bedroom, helped me undress, and saw to my needs. Carl was called, and he easily lifted me into bed, and Jill covered me and kissed me goodnight. She returned to Carl's arms. Jack, Carl and I are going to bed. If you need anything, just ring the bell and I'll be right down. Good night, dear. Good night, buddy. I'll check on you in the morning. Come on, baby, I'm in the mood today. Carl winked at me over Jill's shoulder. I can't wait, big boy. She winked at me too, and I smiled at their playfulness. Damn, this is going to be difficult. Katie, oh my God, this place was incredible. The view of the bay was simply fabulous. There was a tennis court and a huge pool on the horizon with views for miles and miles. I had my own wing of the mansion, with 2 bedrooms and an adjoining bathroom with a huge jacuzzi. There was even a large elevator to the second floor. Jack even said I could use the spare car because it was old and no one needed it. When Miss Jill showed me the machine that I could use, I almost fainted. Oh my God, she was gorgeous. At first I thought it said posh, and she looked very chic, fast and sexy, silver like a diamond. Jill laughed at me, said it was a Porsche and pronounced E like A. I tried to pronounce it, but it still sounded like posh. So I called my mom and told her I had a fancy car, and she just said, "That's good, honey," and went on for an hour about Aunt Annabelle's kidney stones. I said I was going to the jacuzzi, and she said she shouldn't be in the bar because that's not ladylike. I swear Mommy is getting crazy. I told her I'd talk to her later, told her I loved her, and hung up the phone as soon as she started talking about Uncle Bobby's ingrown toenail. Thank God she lived on the West Coast. I relaxed in the bubbles and thought about my incredible recent luck. 4 years ago, I was a wreck. Almost all the time I stuck to my idiot boyfriend Mason, who treated me like crap and constantly beat me. I had no one else, and for some reason I endured this abuse, partly believing that I deserved it. One night he came home in the early hours, drunk, waving a loaded gun in my face and making threats. I cried the whole time, and in the end he hit me. I woke up and decided to run. I didn't have anywhere to go, so I went to a shelter. This shelter was private, and the people there seemed sincere and friendly. It was the best thing I ever did, as fate later proved. The most amazing thing was how much strangers cared for me, and it was this observation that made me think about how I could get a job as a care assistant myself. Mary, the supervisor, promised to speak with the head of the foundation to see if I could be sponsored for a training program. I remember that day clearly when she practically ran to me, beaming with joy, to announce that Mr. Stevens had allocated money and guaranteed a place on the evening courses. It was around this time that I recognized him, the jerk, from a security camera image of a bank robbery while enjoying a bowl of hot soup downtown. Suddenly, the soup became tasteless. Police were offering a $10,000 reward for anyone who recognized one of the criminals caught on camera, and the large black-masked bruiser with a sawed-off gun who glanced at the camera and grinned before the image became blurry and pixelated was instantly recognizable. The missing bottom front tooth, those eyes under the mask, and the way he dragged his left leg, the result of an old wound, made me tremble. That bastard who glanced at the security camera, frozen as the reward amount scrolled below the image, was none other than my disgusting ex, Mason Houston. With shaking hands and quivering lips, I dialed Crime Stoppers and gave up the scumbag's identity. The police found him exactly where I thought he'd be, and the idiot was caught red-handed, still enjoying his spoils. 6 months later, he was convicted, and I received the award anonymously, a small compensation for the horrors he caused me. The money allowed me to rent a room and feed myself, while I worked, studied, and attended classes in the evenings. I guess the rest is history, but imagine my surprise when my first real patient at my first real job turned out to be Jack Stevens, head of Caring for All, the same man who sponsored the shelter and paid for my qualification. The world turned out to be really small. Apparently, the poor guy fell down the stairs and hit his head hard. When I first came to him, the prognosis was grim. He was in a coma for a year before I started working and showed no signs of improvement. A relative, who later turned out to be a brother, applied to have his machines switched off, but I raised a fuss with the medical council, alleging that he sometimes reacted to me with eye movements and sometimes twitched his fingers in response to my questions. That last part was a big fat lie, but I wanted to prove that Mr. Stevens had brain activity and was not a candidate for euthanasia. I owed this man everything I had become, so a few lies were easy to justify. Thank God the decision was in his favor, and I became his primary caregiver for the next 4.5 years. Is it possible for a girl to fall in love with a man in a coma? I had no one else in my life, and perhaps it was the dreamy fantasies of a lost soul that made me want this man to wake up, take me in his arms, and carry me to his castle. During long night shifts, I often looked at the clock at midnight and wished for this miracle. Of course, I knew that he was married. I saw his wife many times. She was absolutely amazing. Her long brown hair flowed like a fiery waterfall, and her bright green eyes shone like unknown stars, and her long, flawless legs were always clicking on the linoleum floor in an endless row of beautiful designer heels. Her tight blouses, impressive bust, plunging neckline, and designer jeans or short skirts always made me feel small and insignificant. God, I was an ex-girlfriend with an addiction, a pathetic skinny black girl from the wrong side of town, dressed in a doctor's scrub. But hey, a girl can dream. I knew that his wife, Jill, as she introduced herself, loved her husband deeply, but even from the very first meeting and the appearance of a man named Carl, I knew that something else was going on. I often saw them holding hands together, even sitting next to Jack, and on several occasions I caught them kissing in the hallway or in the parking lot that could be seen from the nurse's window. When Jill became pregnant and her baby girl was first introduced to Jack, my suspicions were, of course, confirmed. Carl and Jill had a relationship that now included having children, even though I knew for a fact that she was still legally married to my ward. So I kept dreaming. One day my knight will wake up, and I will be there, waiting. And one day, on this beautiful, glorious May Day, he actually did it. I had a feeling this would happen. Over the previous months, I had been bringing life into his body. I was carefully watching his eye movements under his closed eyelids when suddenly, in the middle of the stimulus, they opened and stared straight at me. I screamed and ran after Dr. Morgan. When Jack asked me to become his full-time caregiver and move into his home, I almost died. I knew that he saw my tears and felt my grief about his upcoming departure, but I did not expect this, so here I am, and, wow, the mansion and its surroundings were magnificent, a little more upscale than my noisy studio apartment next to the L. Hey, I even had a jacuzzi now. He basically called me Angel, and I had a Porsche. Jack became my only responsibility. Apart from the full-time cook Elsie, I was the only employee. Elsie was 61, lived with her husband 10 minutes from us, and came in around 11 a.m. every day and left as soon as she had finished cooking dinner, usually around 6 p.m. Thanks to Elsie, the house was always well stocked with food, and lunches and dinners were always exceptional. I have to say she spoiled the kids, but they loved the treats and called her Grandma Elsie, so it was all good. Of course, spending time with Jack only deepened my affection for him, but I saw that he loved his wife deeply, even though his wife was in an ongoing, stable, and intimate relationship with Carl. At first I was shocked, but over time I got used to this strange dynamic. Carl was a huge man and had an easygoing personality. I loved him, but at times I hated him. As time passed, Carl and Jill seemed to tease poor Jack endlessly. At first I thought it was really cruel, until one day I realized everything. In fact, I was helping Jack shower when Jill stormed into her husband's bedroom unannounced. "Oh, sorry, honey, I didn't know you were taking a shower." Jill came in anyway and stood before us like a shining vision. Her toned, feminine body was wrapped in a short and obviously expensive designer dress with a frilly hem. She looked like a flapper from the 20s. God, how I wish my breasts looked like hers. And those legs. I simply froze in amazement, holding the shower handle and continued to water Jack's soapy chest. I stood there with my mouth open, like a statue wrapped in a plastic apron, my hair pinned back and no makeup on. Compared to the vision before me, I was nothing. The awareness of my inadequacy made me shrink and feel very small. How could I compete? The drain hole suddenly seemed attractive. Jill simply smiled, and her full red lips confirmed my insignificance. "Honey," she continued, "Carl and I are going to Vegas and won't be back until Sunday night. I've booked a babysitter for today and tomorrow, including Saturday night, so the girls will be fine. I'll call you from the hotel as soon as we're settled in, and I'll tell you what's going on, that is." She giggled. "So I can get distracted a little, but I promise to call you sometime, dear." Jill grinned, leaned into the shower stall, and kissed her husband's cheek deliciously, leaving two perfect imprint of lipstick, then turned on her heel and noisily walked out of the room, her surprisingly round ass swaying to the unknown music of the 20s. It was then that I realized that Jack loved what his teasing wife was doing. His ragged breathing told me so. "So, do you like it when she teases you?" I continued to shower his body. "You like it when your wife says she's going to sleep with her lover." If he hadn't been chained to the shower chair, I think he would have fallen to his knees. "You love her so much, and yet she exposes her lover to you, knowing it turns you on." Jack groaned in frustration and slammed his palm against the shower wall. His pleasure was overwhelming him. But from that moment, our relationship changed. That night, while Jill and Carl were in Vegas and the nanny and kids were asleep, I sat with Jack in his bedroom, watching an old black and white Hitchcock film on a huge wall panel. There were a lot of birds sitting all over the place, and it was kind of creepy, so I just sat and looked at Jack, sometimes smiling as he looked nervously between me and his cell phone. I think it was the phone that was bothering him, not the birds, because he looked at it the way you might look at a hissing cobra. "Your beautiful wife will call soon to say that she is having a wonderful time with her lover. Do you like it, Jack?" I tried to sound calm, but I think I was just as excited as he was. I was like a lit rocket, looking for flight. He grimaced and quickly looked up, and then just as quickly turned away. I saw pain mixed with life. Just think that at this very moment they are probably making love in some smoky motel. But you like it, don't you, Jack? The phone rang at that moment, making us both jump, but when I saw his dreamy face, I smiled. "Hello, dear," he said in a slightly breathless tone. "How was your night?" I could only hear one side of the conversation, but I quickly caught the gist. Jack was functioning as a man for the first time in 6 years. I screamed in delight as the phone clattered to the floor. Yes, it's safe to say that everything has changed. I heard Jill's anxious voice calling, "Jack, Jack." Picking up the phone, I simply said, "Hi, Mrs. Stevens. Jack just fell out of his chair. He'll call you back." I giggled and hung up. Jack. Memory is a capricious thing. My angel was an aspiration, an inspiration, and life suddenly seemed golden. All these feelings, mixed with confusion, swirled in my confused but ecstatic mind. I was functioning down there again, and my angel, along with my ever-loving wife and her fierce playfulness, had restored the previously supposedly faulty connection between the neurons in my big head and the brain in the smaller one. I wanted to scream with joy. It was the Saturday after that big night. Carl and Jill were still in Vegas, and I was full of new life. I woke up early and just lay there, trying to put the puzzle pieces of my forgotten past together and waiting for my angel to help me get out of bed. I was reliving the events of last night, realizing that Katie had played on my sick fantasies. I should have been shocked, but I was delighted. I may have mentioned this, but I want to reiterate how wonderful Katie is. Okay, she's not in Jill's league when it comes to external perfection, but how can you compare a gazelle to a koala? What is perfection? Katie loved me. I'm not stupid enough not to admit it. She constantly looks at me, her big brown eyes radiating warmth and adoration. It's like she sees me as some kind of god that needs to be worshipped. I'm nothing compared to a real man. I am not only broken, but also completely unremarkable. I'm definitely not Carl and absolutely nothing special. But my wife GLL saw in me something more than just money, because there is no doubt believing that she loved me, despite her relationship with my best friend, and the fact that the two of them had two beautiful children together. I mean, what else could she do when I was in a coma? Yes, it hurts like hell, but I'm also happy for her that she found someone who will love her and care for her, and who better than the one I knew and trusted. Now back to my shadow, my angel Katie. How do we fit in? The quiet knock on the door was just a formality because verbal consent was not required for entry. The smiling dark chocolate face smiled widely as she entered. "Hello and good morning, Mr. Stevens." I hope you slept well." There was a mocking smile in those mesmerizing eyes. Dark perfection, wrapped in a white apron, gilded around the room, uselessly picking up a fallen pillow, parting the heavy curtains, and pouring a glass of ice-cold water. I was sitting in her posh, silly girl with a wheelchair attached to the roof with elastic straps. It was my car, the same one I was driving at the time of the accident. She was over 6 years old, but had low mileage, and my angel adored her and drove her like Foyt. I was amazed at her desire to press her foot as hard as she could into the floor to help stop this damn projectile that she considered her daily, soft way of moving. I even curiously examined my leg to see if it would twitch, even just a little, because my brain was definitely sending all the right signals. So, feeling frustrated and afraid, I decided to verbally squeal instead. "Damn. Look, some bus just left without a signal, but Angel just sighed, rushed to the right, switched, downshifted, and accelerated. As if she was imitating a Skanska rocket. Until 3 months ago, the girl didn't even have a driver's license. The turn into the shopping center parking lot was executed as if one of those precise drivers fitting an overly large car into an equally overly small gap. She pulled the handbrake, stroked the clutch, and the next moment we were sitting at the curb, perfectly parallel parked in the handicapped area. The only thing that gave away the maneuver was the lingering smell of burnt rubber. Oh, and about 100 curious spectators. Angel jumped out of a low car in a light summer dress that reached her knees, running around the hood, grinning like a chimpanzee and showing off to the maximum. Soon she put the chair back in place, and I sat in confusion and shock within its confines, white fingers gripping the armrests and still trying to come to my senses. She was amazing. I realized over time just how much this was true, because she had this natural talent of thinking fast, learning fast, and acting fast. I promised her a shopping day, and in the absence of my wife, I thought today would be a good time. Usually, I would just book some upscale boutique for the day and let the staff there fuss and fuss over her trying it on. But no, Angel wanted to go to the damn mall. I can't remember ever being in a place like this. It was terrible, crowded, and smelly. But this was Angel territory. Now, I've had Angel in my chair before, but never in such a crowded place as we found ourselves on that busy Saturday afternoon. Of course, I was sitting in the front as she was pushing me from behind. Error. Have you ever been on one of those crazy rides where there is a huge screen in front of you with all sorts of obstacles, and as certain death approaches you at high speed, you dodge at the last moment, only to be faced with yet another form of imminent death? Try this, but in reality, for 2 hours, zigzag from dress store to lingerie store, from food court to cafe. I wanted to be sick. She walked through this dense crowd like a bat relying on radar, split-second decisions to turn right, dive left, or stop in place, while avoiding a collision in a split second. This experience made me appreciate carnival rides for how dull they are. Either way, Angel enjoyed every crazy moment, giggled and danced with joy at every purchase I approved. I asked her to try on some pretty sexy dresses and even encouraged her to leave the fitting rooms in her underwear. At first, she was shy and self-conscious, but as the day went on, she became more and more confident. Of course, I praised her and applauded her, and it wasn't just to boost her confidence. I did it because she was a beautiful, exotic creature. I quickly realized that my girlfriend was 5'4" and had, at best, B-cup breasts, but God, she was perfect. There wasn't an ounce of excess fat on her slender body, and her dark skin glowed like pure black marble. I say unnecessary fat because she had an abundance of it on her butt, but wow, she swirled and twirled and laughed and applauded her mirror image with joy. I could tell she was probably having the best day ever. In my life, I encouraged her to go to the beauty salon, and when she came out, I almost mistook her for Jessica Alba until I realized that Jessica would not be alone at the mall, and I took a second look. Angel simply smiled, grabbed my wheelchair, and turned me back towards the crowd. I quickly realized that her happiness was inversely proportional to her sanity. As we slid towards the cafe stop, I was desperately looking for scotch on the menu. When we returned home, still in one piece and surprisingly undamaged, I took Angel out to dinner at Harry's, an upscale restaurant in Bell Street, where I knew one phone call would give us instant entry. She continued to dance in circles until she fell from dizziness, but somehow managed to stage this fall as a sliding lunge into my arms and kiss. Yes, she was truly amazing. Now, you have to forgive this indulgence, but you see, I've never seen Angel in full drag. When she shyly walked into the living room in her new tiny yellow dress, heels, and accessories, I almost fainted. Her legs were slightly turned inward, indicating a lack of confidence. Hands clasped nervously in front of you. The eyes shone, the teeth sparkled, and the newly styled hair flowed freely, like onyx rapids in a tributary of the Amazon. I wanted to worship her feet, and if not for the limitations of the wheelchair, I probably would have done so. Taking the lessons of previous experience into account, I called a limousine and we drove comfortably into the city center, chatting and laughing like two schoolchildren in love. Later that night, she whispered in my ear as she tucked me into bed. Just think, your beautiful wife is making love to her man again right now. Isn't that wonderful? Angel kissed me. Truth be told, I almost forgot my wife existed. It was a wonderful day, and I will cherish it forever. I slept like a baby, but my idea of heaven changed. So now the dynamics around the house became open and unrestrained, except for one thing, my attraction to Katie. My feelings remained coiled up inside me. My wife could see that I was close to my nurse, but to believe that it was anything more than gratitude was perhaps like the evil queen believing that she was still the most beautiful in the world, refusing to admit that Snow White had surpassed her. I loved Jill, there was no doubt about it, but are we, as humans, capable of shared love? My wife firmly believed in this exception, constantly affirming her undeniable love for both me, her husband, and her lover, not forgetting her children and her deep love for them. So can I really love Katie too? She was so far below me and a beautiful black woman, not white, but I knew I loved her, there was no doubt about it. I thought about this question constantly, trying to sort out my feelings. Katie rolled me into the kitchen for breakfast one morning. The children were still sleeping, and it was Sunday. Jill was fussing over a bowl of granola and turned to acknowledge our entrance. God, she looked amazing. Damn, and she wasn't wearing a bra. Hello, dear. Katie, what are you doing today? Jill smiled and walked like a panther towards Carl, who put down his newspaper and invited her onto his lap. An offer that was immediately accepted. Katie seemed oblivious to what was happening in front of her as she poured herself some coffee and leaned on the countertop, holding on to the steaming cup with both hands. I was thinking we could go to the coast for posh, sightseeing or something. Jack needs some sun. She took a loud sip. I made a desperate gesture, as if I was cutting my throat, and desperately shook my head, begging with no gestures. I didn't want to spend time in that car with Edge. I never signed up to be a test dummy. Jill will save me and offer me an alternative. What a great idea, Katie. Jack would enjoy a nice quiet ride. Wouldn't he, darling? My dear wife smiled at me as she fed Carl another spoonful of his breakfast. Jill put down her breakfast bowl, jumped up, and delightedly pulled Carl to his feet. Well, guys, enjoy your day. We're heading back to bed. More giggles and hand-tugging followed her excited words. Hey, what can I say? Carl shrugged, as if reluctantly giving in to my wife's demands. A man's work is never done, he feigned reluctance as Jill tugged at his arm. I was unaware of the presence leaning next to me and holding my hand. The angel's perfume pierced my nasal passages and soaked into my pores. Her scent was intoxicating. It took me a while to realize what she was really saying. Angel, I'd love for you to help, but I can't change Jill. She's my wife, and it wouldn't be right. I could see the disbelief, so I continued. Honey, I approve of their relationship. I've been gone for almost 6 years. What else could my wife do? She loves me and I love her, and I'm not going to cheat on her. I feel guilty every time you touch me, but I consider it therapy. Well, that was my lie to myself. Angel looked at the ceiling. Her big brown eyes became misty as she looked at me. What if we ask her permission? Her voice was almost inaudible. I stroked her beautiful cheek. What if we ask for permission? That was a good question. I could only imagine this moment. Um, Jill, honey, can I, do this with Katie? It will only be once, or maybe once in a while. She will stand there, looking angry and disappointed, arms crossed, eyebrows furrowed. Are you kidding? Do you want to sleep with this little prostitute? She's just nobody. Okay, I admit, she's cute and funny, but anyway, you're not even functioning, and even if you were, I could let you help a little every now and then. But I'll have to ask Carl first. Okay, maybe my brain was spinning a little. Did I forget to tell her that Angel made me work again? I could ask her, Angel, but why do you even want to make love to me? I'm worthless and broken. You need to find a good young, strong man and... I stopped mid-sentence, realizing that she was crying soft, wet tears. I don't want anyone else. Every word was punctuated by sobs. I love you. Oh damn, the word love. It shouldn't have surprised me because I saw it in her eyes and in her actions every day. I've loved you for years. This confession was accompanied by a sob, and her beautiful head fell heavily into my lap. You saved me. I caressed her thick black curls and tried to calm her down. At least she had the courage to admit the truth. Unlike me, the cowardly boy wondered, how could this perfect creature love an ideal, since that is what she clung to all those years while I was locked away? I actually cried when I realized that it was this ideology and love, this belief in me that allowed me to come back, to live again. This girl was special. This girl belonged to me. I didn't save her, she saved me. We cried together. Jill. So, everything then went downhill. Was I sleeping with Carl 3 or 4 times a week, or was Carl sleeping with me? Either way, we were out of control. I kept telling myself it was just sex, but what did I know? What I knew for sure was that I loved my husband. Jack was a kind and thoughtful man, capable of intellectual interaction and friendship. Sure, his money and the quality of life it provided were steep, but I really loved him, so why did I sleep with his best friend? This term is ridiculous. We rarely slept. Guilt should have consumed me, but strangely it didn't. I knew Jack liked to watch me flirt and swoon over Carl and other men when circumstances allowed, so I justified my intimacy as an extension of Jack's fantasies. We should have just been open about it, but both Carl and I thought it was too soon, and how the hell could I admit to cheating on our wedding night? So, ultimately, a mixture of guilt and fear delayed the inevitable. When I convinced Jack that Carl was the perfect person to build a pool shed and outdoor seating area, he quickly agreed to the proposal, not realizing the consequences. As soon as Carl arrived to begin work, we got down to business. I don't think there's a single place in the house where we haven't done this. One day Jack surprised us to death when he came home early. I had just returned from sex by the pool, wearing only a t-shirt over a swimsuit, the hem of which barely reached my belly button. Luckily, I heard the door and ducked behind the bar. Jack, you're early, I screamed unnaturally loudly, trying to warn my lover, whom I left naked by the pool. I pretended to rummage through the utensil drawer. Yeah, but I needed a break. Everyone wants a piece of me. Even had to approve a grant for some poor street girl to go to night school. Why can't people just make simple decisions without my constant supervision? He came up to me, and I wish I could hug him and comfort him, but that could be a disaster. I panicked. I prayed that the stand would hide my lower nakedness. Oh, poor thing, sit down, I'll make you a drink and a kiss. I tried to look calm. I held my breath. Okay, thank you, honey. He stopped walking, turned, and walked into the living room. I grabbed my apron, trying to remember where I left my swim trunks. I should have warned Carl. The apron was just a narrow strip of fabric, but that was all I had. I'll call Carl now. He'll probably want a cool drink, too. He's been working all day today. I tried to sound like a caring wife about poor Carl. I waited for Jack to lean back and close his eyes before rushing into the family room, keeping my apron covered in front of me in case he looked up. Luckily, I managed to escape and ran to the pool. Carl was naked and fast asleep on the edge of the pool. The poor thing was exhausted. I tiptoed up to him and carelessly turned him over into the cold water. What the... He gurgled, splashing his hands, trying to understand how his peaceful sleep had suddenly turned into a nightmare. Get dressed quickly, Jack is home. I crawled on all fours, turning over towels in a panic to find my swimming trunks. Hey, I like this view, he laughed. Carl grinned like a jackal. Hurry up, fool, or we're done for. I found my swimming trunks and climbed into them, adjusting the piece of fabric and smoothing out my apron. Jack had seen me flirting in my swimsuit in front of his friend earlier, so I was hoping it wouldn't be a problem. A quick dive into the shallow waters of the pool and a quick dry-off brought me back into the house, to everyone's surprise with a grinning face like some predator over the edge of the pool. He'll be here soon. Carl is just putting away his equipment. I poured my husband his drink and swung towards his chair, set the drink down and kissed his head. An arm wrapped around my waist and his face snapped up to look at me with confusion. What are you wearing? I quickly lifted my apron to show that I was wearing something, because my bare buttocks might suggest otherwise. God, Jill, you can't walk around like that when Carl is here. Oh dear, Carl is a big boy, and I'm sure he's seen a lot more than that. He's already seen me in that swimsuit, you know. Yes, but I was with you then. What if Carl misunderstands? Jack, I'm an adult. I can take care of myself. I couldn't keep looking at him. My blush was already starting to spread to my neck. I turned and swayed back into the kitchen just as Carl came in, pretending to be tired. Hey, buddy, why are you home? Had an easy day at the office, huh? Dressed in a shirt, shorts, and work boots, Carl looked like some blonde construction hunk from a hardware store commercial. I casually walked over and handed him a glass of ice water and turned around. Do you want to eat something, honey, like a sandwich or something? Jack's eyes sparkled with lust as I innocently waited for his answer. I want a ham sandwich, baby. The teases and hints continued, but the longer we played this game, the harder it was for me and us to admit our wrongdoings. I realized that this was entirely due to the fact that I realized that what I was having with Carl was not just sex. That has changed. I fell in love with a big goofball, and that fact scared the crap out of me. Admitting sexual attraction was a revelation on a whole different level when also admitting love for another man, and the biggest problem was that I loved Jack very much. I knew I was finished, and the discovery of my betrayal was inevitable. It didn't matter when it happened. It was arbitrary that this happened. How this happened was devastating. Carl had long since finished his chores, a task that probably took twice as long as it should have. I think Jack began to worry about my constant headaches and stomach problems every time he hinted or suggested intimacy. I always took care of his needs, just without sex. He was concerned about my needs, but I assured him that everything was fine and that I just needed some time to get better. So maybe he was suspicious or something, but we'll never know what made him come home early from what was supposed to be a week-long shareholder meeting in Chicago. If he had called to say he was coming home early, we would have been fine. As it turned out, he called, but I missed the call. My call log confirmed this fact. Unfortunately, I couldn't avoid spending the entire week cuddling with Carl because I was addicted, lost in passion, addicted to sex. I knew I needed help, professional help, but I was in denial, believing that everything would work out. And who was I kidding anyway? Because as said, the inevitable catches up with us all eventually. Jack found Carl and me. The gray ghost, swaying unsteadily in place, was a lifeless creature, devoid of movement. I've never seen anything so foreign. I screamed. Jack, dear. If he had not approached him so quickly, perhaps everything would have turned out differently. The broken creature raised its hands, as if surrendering to life, stepped back and stepped straight from the landing. Back. He fell. Carl exclaimed, damn, and I screamed, and passed out. Someone hit me in the face, and through my blurred vision, I recognized Carl's worried face. Baby, come on, get dressed. I called 911, but I think he's dead. I put on my dress and tried to get to the door, but Carl was blocking the way. No, you shouldn't see him, baby. Stay here and clean everything up. I'll take care of the paramedics. Sirens wailed nearby. Seeing my man broken and barely alive, hooked up to tubes and flickering monitors almost destroyed me. Consumed by grief and guilt, I think I cried for a week. When he didn't wake up, I wanted to die. Carl was always there for me, comforting and supporting me, but his grief may have outweighed mine. We were both responsible and suffered terribly together. I lived in a dark world, consumed by self-pity and fear for my sanity. The doctor's prognosis was grim. Jack might never recover, and at best would remain in a vegetative state. My life was over, or so my guilt-ridden mind kept telling me. I was locked in my room one gray day, curled up in a ball. I don't know when I started to find comfort in this pathetic way. The door swung open, and the lock shattered into pieces. Carl stood there like a Greek god, with tears streaming down his cheeks. "It's time to live, princess." He approached me as if I were a light box of skin and bones, and carried me to the pool, where fruits and treats were waiting for us. I gave up after a few tries and just let him feed me, thinking I would throw it all up anyway. Yes, it happened the first couple of times, but eventually my exhausted body accepted the nutrition. It took a few days, but eventually I was able to keep the food down. Carl held my head close to his face, and with tears flowing, he said, "Baby, we made a mistake, but it was an accident. I blame myself, but the thought of your pain pushes me forward. I need to take care of you, and I need to take care of me. I have no one, baby, just you." Seeing Carl cry was like imagining Sahara shedding tears. Big, strong guys never cry. His depression may have been greater than mine. I realized at that moment that I was selfish and self-absorbed. I wiped a large tear from his face and smiled nervously. He needed my comfort as much as I needed his. This was the turning point, and the realization that I had to comfort my lover led me to recovery. Carl saved my life. 4 months after the incident, for the first time since that terrible day, we made tender, sweet love. It was a different feeling. With all this stress and events, I forgot to take my pills. I completely forgot for several months. So it's no surprise that the next time I threw up, I suspected a different reason. Jessica was born healthy and happy, and when I first saw her, I cried. My husband lay broken in the hospital, and my daughter will never know him as her father. She belonged to another man whom I loved to beat. Although in a different way, less than 14 months later, I gave birth to Ty's daughter, Jade. Her green eyes reflected mine. She was great, and our family was complete. Carl decided to have the procedure. Jack's investments were self-managed. Dividends covered all expenses, and every day, unbeknownst to me, his shares and assets increased exponentially. I happily signed a prenuptial agreement, which I understood would guarantee me a significant income in the event of his accidental death, but as long as he remained alive, his wealth and mansion were at my disposal. His damn brother tried to declare him dead, but thanks to the testimony of his sweet nurse, we survived the attempt and Jack continued to sleep in his serene state. The only thing that broke my heart was that Jack and I didn't have children. We missed this opportunity, and now it was too late. Without an heir, his family fortune would eventually pass to his brother or nephews, and that knowledge stank like dead fish in the hot sun. Of course, Carl lived with us and slept in my bed every night. We were still making love. I missed Jack's brilliant mind and gentleness, his caring and understanding. But Carl had other qualities, not least his ability as a lover. We never watched romantic movies together like I did with Jack, or old black and white classics. I missed this terribly. We sort of led our own lives until it was time to go to bed. I learned how to be a mother, and it was cool. The girls were so funny and took up almost all of my time. God, they were beautiful. I sighed as I sat in that white, sterile room, while Katie, the nurse, busied herself fluffing pillows and checking the many tubes. The girls played quietly on the rug. Jessica tried to reattach the heads of Jade's severed dolls, while the younger one quickly made the dolls headless again. Katie, all good things come to those who wait. Whoever said that was a delusional idiot. I couldn't wait. I needed to talk to Mrs. Gill, and I found her in the conservatory reading a steamy novel. I knew it was hot because I read it myself when she was with Mr. Carl. Excuse me, Mrs. Stevens, can I talk to you, madam? The beautiful woman looked at me and smiled. Of course, Katie, and please call me Jill. I've told you that a million times, honey. Yes, Mrs. Stevens, sorry, Mrs. Stevens, and from now on I will call you Jill. Mrs. Stevens. She rolled her eyes. Oh, well. Mrs. Stevens, can I experiment a little with Mr. Stevens? I think he has a little sensitivity down there, you know, and I'd like to encourage that a little. I lied as best I could because Mr. Stevens was functioning, but his wife never checked on him. I knew the secret ingredient, which was teasing him about his wife's infidelity. You want to make love to him? Yes, miss. Honey, that doesn't even work. And even if it did, he can't have kids. Damn, that was too much information, my fault. What's the point anyway? It would only upset him. She paused in thought. Hey, is this about you, honey? Do you have a boyfriend? I've never seen you leave this place. Do you want this, honey? This took me by surprise. Well, no, of course not, maybe, but I don't know. My brain split into pieces. It was about me and my secret boyfriend. Her husband. Do I need this? Hell yeah, I was fidgeting in my shoes. Darling, if you need it, I can ask Carl. I'm sure he'll be happy to help you. Oh my God. Oh, well, maybe, but could I try with Mr. Stevens just to see? Katie, honey, I know you believe in my husband. You've cared for him for years, and I'm sure you've experimented in the past. But he's paralyzed, beautiful, and the doctors say he'll never function. Again. She saw my disappointment. Okay, so that pouting and batting of the eyes was slightly played out. But, if you want, then please, be my guest. I'm sure Jack will appreciate everything you do. Good luck, dear, and Carl's offer still stands if you want the real thing. Mrs. Gill smiled, picked up her book, and returned to her steamy novel. I wanted to dance with joy. I had a free ticket. I ran to Jack's room with the good news. He sat on the floor, trying to understand the instructions for his new authorized chair, which sat next to him, sparkling. Jack, Mrs. Stevens said it would be okay. I was talking 100 miles an hour. He looked up in bewilderment. She said we could do it. Calm down, Angel. Do what? You know, make love. I jumped on the spot. What? You asked my wife if we could. Jack's jaw dropped, and he blushed. You actually asked my wife that. I nodded proudly, smiling like a cat. Uh-huh, and she said I could get it out of my head. Jack's expression became strange. There was something between shock and embarrassment. I may have been just an easy girl, but the poor paralytic was at my mercy. I rolled him over and saw that his eyes were full of fear. Be afraid, Jack, be afraid. I helped him sit in his new chair. I think I scared him half to death, so I leaned over and kissed him. You know, Mrs. Stevens said I could ask Carl to help with my needs. She said he would be happy to have sex with me. I smiled. I wasn't stupid. I knew that this wonderful, caring, loving man loved me. Small, insignificant me. The idea that Carl could have sex with me the same way his wife did, well, that would either light the fire or put it out. We made love. Jack groaned. When the door swung open and Jill burst in with a worried look on her face, I almost panicked. What's going on? I heard Jack in pain. No, Mrs. Stevens. Mr. Stevens just wanted to take me for a ride. I smiled at her with big, innocent eyes. Yes, honey, Angel. I mean, Katie just wanted to ride in the new chair with me. Well, we'd better go then. What I didn't see was her smile. I'm not stupid. I knew I was pregnant long before morning sickness started. Something was different, some kind of spark flared up inside, and this caused a confession. Jack and I have gone on many wheelchair excursions since then, but I knew this was the first time. How this happened may be the great unsolved mystery of modern medicine. Doctors said he would never function. We proved them wrong. Experts said he would never be able to conceive a child, but we proved them wrong again. But now I am scared. If I was pregnant, how would Jack react? I was a nobody, and racial differences will forever mark my child. Should I quietly get rid of the pregnancy and just remain silent? I laughed at the thought. I'd rather die than do this. Having a child meant everything to me, and having a child with Jack made it perfect. What about his wife? What will Jill think? Oh my God. Then it dawned on me. My child will be the sole heir to Jack's fortune by birth. Damn it! Jill and her daughters will have no claims and may end up homeless. She will hate me. They will all hate me and our child, and we weren't even married. With these thoughts swirling around in my head, I was in no hurry to announce the news. I need time to figure everything out. I took Jack in the elevator and secretly brought him to my room. We often hid here to take a bath together. His baby was in my belly, and he didn't even know it. I'll tell him tomorrow. He was so happy right now, and I didn't want to ruin the moment. Sometimes there is no time like the present, if only. I tossed and turned all night, fighting the inevitable. Tomorrow at breakfast, I will announce the news. I tried to imagine this scene. Jill will sit on Carl's lap as usual. Children will probably eat melon and strawberries with yogurt. I'll be nervously pouring coffee for Jack as he walks into the room in his new chair, weaving around the kids' toys and objects as if he were slaloming. I'll get him some coffee and cough and start my announcement while standing in front of my bosses. Sorry, but I want to say something. All eyes turned to me with interest. You see, the thing is, I might be pregnant. Well, actually, I'm pregnant. Pregnant. I then sat up before fainting. I could imagine the silence. Will Jill understand all the consequences? Does she understand what happened and how it will change her life and the lives of her descendants? Will she scratch my eyes out and call me a dirty woman of easy virtue? What will Carl say, knowing that his quality of life may also deteriorate? Oh my God. Sleep left me, and I tossed and turned until I decided to go out onto the balcony and breathe in the fresh, cool night air. The roses below me swayed in the moonlight, and somewhere in the forest an owl hooted. I could even hear the surf crashing against the rocks. This place was perfect, so peaceful. That's when all hell broke loose. The sound made me turn into a dark, moonlit room, and through the transparency of the billowing curtain, I saw a shadow quickly move towards the door and raise its hand towards my bed. That was the end. Mason Houston came to kill me. His eyes radiated venom. Time to die, bitch. Jill. Sitting in that hospital room and watching my husband sleep was hard. It was hard for everyone. The girls knew him simply as Uncle Jack, and Jessica asked why we visited him so often, since there was nothing to do there. I'm embarrassed to admit, but over time our weekly visits became monthly. Carl suggested that I should let him go, but how could I? It was the worst form of grief. It was twilight grief. You can't let go because your love is still alive. Without letting go, you don't get closure, and you get stuck in some strange zone from which there seems to be no way out. Thank God Jack had Katie. I watched her take care of him, and it warmed my heart. Any idiot could see that she loved him. She clung to hope, hope that if any of us dared admit was lost. I believe without a doubt that it was this girl's steely determination and unwavering refusal to lose that helped open Jack's eyes on that fateful day. So, when she approached me and nervously asked permission to play with my husband, I gave her my blessing. What harm could this do? Now I'm not completely blind. I saw how my husband reacted to her teasing actions, so I knew it worked in a way, but what I didn't know was that it was actually fertile. If I had known this small but important information, my answer to the angel's request might have been different. Yes, I knew that the stupid man called her angel, and I knew why. God, if I woke up after 6 years of lifelessness and saw that shining dark face, I would swear she was angelic too. But I've been thinking about it since then, this unknown knowledge that my husband could have conceived a child, and now I am glad that I did not know. That he was working again, I mean, and in Angel's defense, she didn't know either. It's been written down. My husband can't have children. Fate has a way of dealing out cards. We are dealt hands that we must play, and, good or bad, you make the best of your lot. The guilt of what Carl and I did behind my husband's back still bothered me greatly. His injuries were a direct result of my infidelity. I spent months wanting to die because of my guilt. I can honestly say that we would have come with a pure heart and confessed, but that is not what happened. I truly believe that Jack would probably approve of our union. Sex with someone else would be a natural extension of this game, and it could solve our need to have kids problem. Better children of Carl than of an unknown donor. But alas, we will never know because he found out about our deception in the worst possible way. It was incredibly insidious. Thank God he did not remember that terrible day, but the guilt burned deeply in my soul, and I will carry this burden to my grave. I didn't deserve him, and I didn't deserve the life he provided for me. Yes, I cried many times because of this paradox, many sleepless nights. But now I have stopped crying because it is time to fix everything. Now, I may have mentioned that I'm not stupid. Well, not always anyway. If you think that a woman is the same before pregnancy as she is after, then you are mistaken. The next day I noticed that shine that appears on a pregnant woman. The change was subtle, but there was an extra blush, a slight spring in her step, and a sparkle in her huge, innocent brown eyes. After 2 weeks I was sure. Oh yes, Angel really was pregnant. So what did this mean for me? For us? Carl and I deserved nothing more than Jack's leftovers. This knowledge and understanding of Angel's condition actually calmed my guilt, as if it balanced the situation. Maybe he'll kick us out, file for divorce, and send us away. But knowing Jack, I didn't think so. I regretted not being a worthy wife for him or a woman to father his heir. But if it weren't for Jack's Angel, he wouldn't have had an heir at all. Her faith in him deserved reward. I smiled then, because this was payback for us, and at least his vile brother would be forever deprived of his greed. I mean, he was a very rich man, okay, rewarded in his father's will. But Jack was a smart, excellent businessman, and he was trusted with this business because he was the eldest, and his father trusted him. Yes, it was a victory on all sides. So when will the stupid girl make her big announcement? Every morning at breakfast for the last 2 weeks, I waited, almost ready. I think I was more nervous than she was. But every morning, and at every opportunity, she glanced at me like a frightened little mouse and ran away to hide. I had to smile. Be brave, my angel. This cat will not bite. She loves you, beauty. My God, someone just screamed. I pushed Carl, and the big man jumped and jumped out of bed like a crazy bear, waking him up from his hibernation, quickly disappearing into the darkness of the corridor. I grabbed the robe and hurried after him. As I ran down the hallway, turning the corner into the west wing, I noticed that Angel's bedroom door was missing. From the darkness to the right came the screech of 2 electric motors coming off their maximum load. My husband rushed past me from the passage connected to the elevator, his eyes fixed on the opening door as he flew into the room, his eyes on the target. It took me a while to realize what the hell had just happened. Someone behind the door was sobbing. Holy saints, I lost consciousness. Reality returned like a creeping fog. Someone shone a bright light into my eye. Th. Quiet. It's okay, ma'am. Are you okay? The nurse called 911. We're here to help. Your husband fell badly. Another man was taken to the hospital with gunshot wounds. He's in the same ambulance as your husband. Another person is dead. But you'll be fine. It looks like you just fainted. The nurse has some bruises and a bad bump on her head, but she's okay too, and she's looking after your kids in their room. The police will want to get statements, meme. I nodded, still trying to piece things together. The darkness swallowed me again. This time, when I came to my senses, Angel was smiling at me. Ha! There you are, Mrs. Stevens. Welcome back. She giggled and ran the warm cloth over my forehead. I struggled to my elbows and looked around, returning to my bedroom. How many times have I told you to call me Jill, Angel? About 1,000,000, she giggled again. I pulled her towards me and kissed her. So, I'm guessing Jack and Carl are okay, otherwise you wouldn't be here taking care of me. Angel nodded. Carl is a tough guy, but Jack is even tougher, she grinned. But who was the shooter and what did he want? Suddenly, Angel became quieter and sobbed. He is dead. Jack killed him. It was my ex-boyfriend. I reported him, and he got 10 years for armed robbery. He was released 3 weeks ago, and he found me. Wanted to kill me. She began to cry openly. It's all my fault, Mrs. Stevens. I grabbed her bowed head and wrapped my arm around her neck, as if suffocating her. It's not your fault, beautiful, and what did you call me? I squeezed tighter. Jill. Jill, your name is Jill, Mrs. Stevens. I let go of the wonderful creature and smiled through my tears at her puzzled face. I give up. The afternoon after a night of chaos, we first sat at Carl's bedside and listened to his complaints. The children pressed some buttons, because of which a nurse came running and suggested that it was time to leave. Angel leaned towards Carl and whispered in his ear. I heard her clearly. Thank you, Carl, for saving my life last night. I would be dead right now, you know that? No, beautiful, you saved our lives that day when you walked into that hospital and saw my girlfriend's husband, my best friend. For the first time, last night was the least I could do. Angel simply shrugged and kissed the big guy on the cheek. We were escorted out of the room without ceremony by a stern nurse and directed to our next destination nearby down the hallway. I held Jade under my arm like a bag and Jessica followed behind us, trying to imitate my clicking heels using a walking stick she had taken from Carl's room. Jack was sitting on the pillow, but as soon as I entered the room, a feeling of fear came over me. I may have a sixth sense when it comes to reading people, and he didn't look good, although his smile said otherwise. Hey guys, what's new? Yes, too cheerful, even for Jack. Before I could say anything, Angel beat me to it. What's wrong, Jack, what's wrong? She immediately began fiddling with his headband, scanning his body for anything missing. I sat Jay down on the floor and handed the plastic syringe without a needle and thermometer to Jessica. She immediately threw her patient sister onto the floor and got to work. She's right, Jack. What's going on? I squeezed his hand. Nothing. Everything is fine. He shrugged unconvincingly. I frowned. Okay, I'll tell you what. If we tell you a big secret, you'll tell us yours, okay? What if my secret is bigger than yours? Then what? He smiled, but it was a tired smile. I promise you right now that our secret is much bigger than yours. Anyway, size doesn't matter. Well, not too much anyway. Angel looked puzzled, looking quickly between Jack and me, as if she was missing something. Jack shrugged. Okay, but first you. And if I decide that your secret is insignificant compared to mine, then I reserve the right to remain silent unless a lawyer is assigned to me. He chuckled, a little more playfully this time. Okay, honestly, because everything will pale in comparison. I grinned. This will unsettle him, but fear still took hold of my soul, and I shuddered deeply. Okay, Angel, tell Jack our secret. Her eyes widened in disbelief. I winked and smiled. Angel. Should we tell Jack our secret? What secret? I looked up nervously, and her eyes nodded in understanding. Crap, she knew. How is this even possible? I didn't tell anyone, and I knew I wasn't showing it. Because I checked every day. Hell, I wasn't even sick. Although now I wanted to puke. What a secret. I tried to pretend to be in denial. I was terrible at poker. Angel, tell Jack now, because otherwise I will, but it will be better if you, dear. She seemed to sense my fear, and then the understanding of my uncertainty suddenly showed in her eyes. I love you madly, so don't think this changes anything. I'm happy for you, and you deserve it, okay? She squeezed my trembling hand and smiled warmly. Go ahead, beauty, you can do it. I took a deep breath. My mind was spinning. Jack, I mean, we're having a baby. I was afraid that he might not have heard the last words because they were barely audible. There was silence, broken only by the clatter of the monitor monitoring Jack's heartbeat. He suddenly started beeping. Jill then started clapping for joy. Jack's jaw dropped and froze. I looked down at the floor. The child had a thermometer in his nose while a nurse injected a dummy serum into his ear. I wanted to crawl under the bed. At that moment, two arms wrapped around me and pulled me towards them. Wet cheeks pressed against mine. "Oh my God, you're not kidding," Jack was sobbing. I hugged him tightly. My knight. But how? He pushed me away, his face expressing bewilderment. My mouth didn't obey, but his wife obviously had it working. "Well, Jack, if a man and a woman have this, well, sex, and voila. A baby." Jill clapped her hands again, bouncing cheerfully in her chair. "But you work, dear. 6 years of waiting and building up, and here we are." Jill laughed cheerfully. "That blow to your head must have knocked, or set back, as in this case, the train. This little cutie believed in you so much that she alone deserves to be rewarded. You deserve each other, and I am incredibly happy for you too." She leaned over and kissed her husband. I felt small and proud at the same time. "Okay, that certainly puts my little secret to shame." Jack laughed nervously, and I glanced quickly at Jill. "I was just going to say that I want to take you all on vacation to Australia." "Oh no, you're not getting away with this, Mr. Avoid the Problem. You promised, and you know that our secret defeats your pathetic secret by a wide margin. Now spit it out, darling." I looked at Jack and Jill, worried and afraid. Jill suspected something. I knew it for sure. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Jack looked defeated. He looked at the bedside drawer and nodded. I hurriedly pulled out the drawer, and there, staring back at me, was an envelope that clearly contained X-rays. Oh shit, I pulled them out. And the slippery film slipped from my shaking hands and scattered across Jack's bedclothes. I didn't even need to hold it in my hands to understand what it meant. His insides sparkled like Christmas lights. "They put me through an MRI just to check for any injuries." He smiled sadly. "Yes, good news, no more injuries." I turned my frightened face towards Miss Jill. She has already rolled back. Her jaw worked, and a wounded scream echoed through the bleached white room just as she collapsed to the floor. I think I wanted to howl, but everything went dark. Doctors offered every drug imaginable, including substances considered illegal. Chemotherapy was neglected due to the advanced stage of the cancer and the fact that it had affected almost every internal organ. He was in remission for 20 years after the cancer, although it was unclear when the disease actually returned because he lay in a coma all these years without anyone checking. Jill and I spent a lot of time hugging and crying in each other's arms. Jack was allowed to go home and die. His medical team gave him 3 months, but he was fighting a fight that no man could win. I even asked my doctor to perform a cesarean section, ahead of schedule, just to let Jack leave early to avoid pain, because I knew what he fought so hard for: witness the birth of your only child. And so it happened that he was given every possible medicine, and Jack and I ended up driving along the coast road to Posh. A mechanical crane was attached to the ski racks, and the new wheelchair rode in style. I was 6 months pregnant, and although Jack had lost weight, his spirits remained high. "Yahawa!" he shouted out the window as I took 3rd place and rushed past the slow-moving van. I couldn't wait to teach little Jack to drive. Someday it will be his car, passed on by his father through me. Jack always liked Posh, so I never sold it. Oh, yes, I knew I was having a boy. I had an ultra scan, and Jack knew too. A slow-moving semi-trailer pulled into our lane without direction. I dodged, dived to the left, and rammed the second one. The exhausts howled as we surged forward, and the turbines howled in agreement. I put it into 3rd gear, and the engine began to purr. Jack raised the bird and yelled, "Where did you get your license, you moron?" I laughed at his enthusiasm, spat it out, and patted my fat belly. I felt little Jack kicking me. Perhaps he was telling me to keep living, because without his father, this life would undoubtedly be a dull gray void. I smiled, deciding to make it a rainbow. One morning, Jill walked into Jack's room with a stack of documents and a thoughtful look. "Good morning, Mrs. Stevens," I tweeted. She winced. "I named her Mrs. Stevens just to turn her on. Jack, I have a question for you. I didn't tell Carl about it because, frankly, he doesn't need to know. She stood in front of her husband and handed him the documents. Jack looked worried, but scanned the forms carefully. Do you want a divorce? His voice sounded sad. Hell no, that's the last thing I want. I love you so much it hurts, but sometimes we have to give up what we value, for the good of others. Tears streamed down Jill's face. This is for your son. She approached me, trying to smile, but her lower lip trembled. And this is for this beautiful girl. She hugged me. An angel needs an identity, and your son and your heir needs a family name, a legal family name. Jill hugged me closer and then squeezed my hand. I want you to sign these papers and then marry this incredible woman. But, no buts. Jill, will you look after Angel and my son when I'm gone? Jack blinked at the salty moisture. Darling, it's me who needs supervision. Angel is much stronger than me. Teach her to manage her interests and don't worry about me. I am absolutely confident that I will survive. Jack nodded, thinking as usual. He looked over the papers and signed each one accordingly. I just cried. The immediate family gathered around, and I sobbed like a baby, spilling out my I-DOS and watching as if I were someone else as my new husband held my shaking hand and slid the ring onto my trembling finger. People kissed me and hugged me, and I floated on a cloud. This insignificant girl from nowhere is now Mrs. Catherine Stevens. Jill hugged me and whispered, "You must call me Jill from now on." She grinned as if she had won the lottery. I giggled. "Yes, Miss Stevens." Apparently Jack was too sick to travel, and I was 8 months pregnant, so we just planned to enjoy each other's company. I pressed my back against my husband's chest as he wrapped his thin arms around me and nuzzled my neck. "Angel, I want you to feel life when I leave." I tried to intervene. "Shut up for a second because I need to say this, okay?" I nodded. "Good girl. I know you'll want to switch off and go to sleep, but this will greatly disappoint me, and I will be watching, you know that, don't you?" I nodded as the tears fell quickly. I didn't believe that my voice would sound strong. "I wouldn't mind your remarriage, but I have a feeling it's never going to happen. Let it not happen." I shook my head furiously. It was true. "So, you need to marry someone, actually. We both need someone who can satisfy our needs." Jack scratched the air, showing his braces. "So, my beautiful girl, what do I care about?" I turned my head and admitted that my vision was blurry, but I needed to see him. What did this question mean? In the context of the question, I knew he was referring to his sex. Jack was worried about a lot of things, but the one thing that really cheered him up, and that pretty much fixed him, was the realization that his wife had slept with his friend. You like to watch, or rather imagine, your wife making love. With another man. With Carl. Jack nodded and blushed. "You always knew me better than I knew myself. You're a smart girl." Jack kissed me on the nose. "So what will make me feel good about? What will make me happy up there?" "You want your wife to sleep." My body suddenly became like ice. I was his wife. Having been married for only 2 hours and thinking of myself as his wife, it was foreign. Realization hit me in the face. "No, you can't be serious." He grinned and raised his eyebrows. "Angel, you need this, and I need this. Unless you decide to get married again, I want you to accept Carl's proposal." It stunned me. Carl's proposal? I probably looked like I'd been hit with a stun gun. "Well, Jill actually suggested it. She is concerned about your well-being and has offered to let Carl have sex with you. We understand there will be no love, just good old satisfaction, and you can move on. It will be much better than the stress and frustration of abstinence, and Carl is safe." My God, he was serious. His delivery sounded like a discussion about buying a new car and the merits of airbags versus anti-lock brakes. Of course, this concept is terrible. Okay, Carl was a nice guy, and he was quite attractive, and I knew he was capable. The idea, shocking as it was analytically possible. He was right. I couldn't spend the rest of my life without sex, and we both knew I'd never get married again. For me, this marriage was the only one. How could another man replace him? I fell in love with him when he was in a coma, for God's sake. Yes, but there is one condition, one that you must promise to always fulfill. Okay, talk. I was breathing raggedly. Every time Carl makes love to you, you must wear a blindfold. This will help you focus your mind and vision on me. I want you to see my face every time you make love, because I hope it will be like loving me. A single tear slipped from my husband's left eye, and that was the end for me. I cried like a child. We hugged each other tightly. The idea took root. I'm not sure I can do this, Jack, I mean. Hey, I know it'll be hard at first, but I thought I'd help you out the first few times to help you get used to it. What if I put this bandage on you now? We will do this together. I know my eyes were like saucers. You can't be serious. Now, this is our wedding night, but we did it. Exactly 3 weeks later, I was lying in a hospital bed, counting backwards from 10. Almost instantly, or so it seemed, as soon as I counted to 5, I heard a baby crying. 10 minutes later, Jill was holding little Jack so I could see his wrinkled monkey face. God, he was beautiful. As the medicine wore off, I looked to return to reality. Jack S.R. sat in a chair, holding the armrests with white knuckles. He seemed to be clinging to life, wanting his exhausted body to hold on a little longer. Jill pressed the baby against his cheek so he could cuddle with her son. I couldn't stop crying, but they were tears of happiness. Jack left us 2 weeks later. He was my knight in shining armor. I will miss him very much. Carl. I walked into the nursery and did my angry bear frowning impression. Angel, Miss Stevens would like you to be present in the winter garden now. Angel glanced up nervously, pretending to fold a baby blanket that had been folded to within an inch 1,000,000 times before. Jack Jr. was asleep. A month passed, and she spent most of that time here hiding and folding. I crossed my arms and waited. She struggled to her feet and carefully slipped past me. Jill waited for her presence, and I smiled from behind the gorgeous dark-skinned girl as she hesitated, feeling Jill's narrowed eyes. Honey, it's time. You know Jack is watching you, don't you? She stirred and looked down modestly. Yes, it was just a squeak. Do you think he's proud of you now? Angel just shook her head. No, he's actually very disappointed in you, honey. At yours, posher cobwebs and moss growing on the roof. Carl needs to go to the market and buy some vegetables. Jill looked at me mischievously, and I shook my head furiously. There's no way I'm going with her in that car. So, go and get out of those awful pajamas, Mrs. Stevens, and take that big trunk to Said Market. Now. Angel jumped, looked back at me, saw my fear, and thought it was because of Jill's trampling scream. She turned and quickly ran out of the room. Please don't make me ride in that car with her. Please, I can drive my truck and... Oh, you big child, you know how much Angel loved that car. They rode it everywhere together. She needs to get back on the pony. Get yourself together and just do it. Let her remember the good times. You can scream if you want. Damn it, Jack has been doing this all along, but just let her go. She needs to get out of the house and start living again. Angel returned a few minutes later, wearing a short floral sundress and white flat sandals. She stood with her feet turned, looking repentant and punished. Damn, she was cute. Jill tossed me the car keys, and I dragged the struggling girl into the garage. First, she backed into the neighbor across the street trash can, and then sped away without changing gear and breaking my neck. She looked at me nervously a couple of times, and I smiled through gritted teeth, just to confirm how much I liked it. We drove through a roundabout, narrowly missing a truck on the right. She pointed her finger at the truck's horn and quickly accelerated. Soon she was taunting innocent cyclists and cursing some old granny leaning on a cane who was running too slowly for her life. Gear changes were silky smooth, and the steering wheel moved like a cellist playing her instrument. The elegant sports car became her Stradivarius. She was a gifted performer and was soon completely engrossed in performing her complex symphony. I only screamed once, so bite me. Turning the handbrake into the space of the car did its job, but I'm still proud of myself. Angel grinned at me like a fox. Welcome back, beauty. A month had passed since the trip to the market, but I was sitting in the living room with Jill on my lap. It was already late at night, and we were enjoying our time away from the kids. Angel crept into the room and coughed, trying to get our attention. She stood with a shy look and clasped her hands behind her back. Her body curved softly. Jill looked up and smiled. Yes, Angel, what can we do for you? Miss Stevens, I was. Well, I was wondering if... She stopped. Spit it out, darling, I don't read minds. Jill leaned close to my ear and whispered, look and get ready. Well. She pulled her hands out from behind her back. A piece of black cloth hung from her hand. Oh, I see. So what do you say? Please. The eyes darted momentarily from studying the pile of the carpets. No, that's not what you say, Mrs. Stevens. You say, hey, Carl, I'd like to make love to my husband tonight. Could you help me with this? Angel shuddered nervously and looked at me with her big brown eyes. Carl, could you do what she said? I don't understand, honey. What exactly do you want? I wanted to laugh, but the poor thing was clearly embarrassed. I want to make love to my husband, but I need your help. Oh, I see. Well, how about you go to your bedroom, undress, put on a blindfold, and think about your man. I'll join you soon, okay? She nodded happily and ran out of the room. I chuckled and turned to my lover. Well, what should we poor men do? Oh, such is life. Thanks, Jack. He was the greatest of men. It's worth mentioning what I tried to tell him. I needed absoluteness. Holding hands with Jill, we knelt by his hospital bed. His hours were numbered, but we wanted to tell him what had happened, how we had abused his trust and betrayed his generosity. We didn't just sleep together behind his back. We deceived him on the night of his wedding and had sex. I was making love to his wife when he found us in his bed. That night when I rushed to him in a panic out of guilt, that same night when he staggered back in fear, fell down the stairs and ruined his life. It was entirely my fault. Our fault, and we were desperately seeking forgiveness. I remember that conversation well. Jack, we want to tell you something. We want to tell you about that night, about the night when you fell. Carl, I don't need to know. What I know is that you love Jill and that she loves you. It is obvious that a woman can love several people. Jill does it with ease, and no matter what happened that night or before, it never changed her love for me. I know this because she shows it to me every minute of every hour of every day of the week. Jack's voice was hoarse and weak, his time running out. Jill just started sobbing. She was overcome with guilt for everything. Jack weakly pulled our clasped hands towards him. If that's what you need, then I'm happy to give it. I forgive you both and want you to live happily ever after. Take care of those beautiful girls and look after my angel and my little boy. I commit you both to this promise. Jack exhaled a weak sigh and closed his eyes. Now go and live. My thoughts returned to the present. Tears streamed down my face. Well, who's first? Angel. Life went on. I was healed. Jill was our conductor, and Carl and I were her performers. Together, we will continue to live and honor Jack's legacy. After that request for reconciliation and my return to the world my husband had left behind, I found myself sleeping in a large bed with Jill and her lover. I always slept on one side of Jill and Carl on the other. She was our glue. I needed companionship, and although I had no real feelings for other women, my glue was special. Oh, don't get me wrong, I admired beautiful girls and wanted to be one of them. But this woman was a goddess. She was my boss and my lover. I could understand why my husband loved her because I came to worship her too. So our strange relationship worked. I had a beautiful, bronze-skinned boy who was adored by his two gorgeous sisters. They treated him like a doll, always dressing him up and bossing him around. Jack Jr. loved it and ran after them like a dark shadow. Jill and Carl never discussed marriage. It was a topic that never needed discussion. Like me, she will remain the ex-wife of the only real man to ever grace planet Earth. We were two Miss Stevens, a tall porcelain Barbie doll and her short, Dark cabbage patch other half. We loved each other immensely. Angel, what the hell are you doing? That's how the interaction began normally. Nothing, Miss Stevens. A meme. I tried to look innocent. She rolled her eyes at my ridiculous title reference. Am I just folding your underwear? Come here, my pet. I closed the box and walked up to my queen. Do you think about him? She knew me. I nodded and looked at my feet. It's okay, honey. You're allowed to think about him, but don't let it consume you. She kissed me. Find these kids and bring them ice cream. Yes, ma'am. Angel, please don't call me ma'am. Sorry, Miss Stevens meme. I grinned. She lunged and I screamed, easily dodging her and ducking under her outstretched arm. I walked out the door and ran with her in those stupid heels, sliding on the marble floor behind me. Ah, Jack. Someday in the future. My iPhone 16 vibrated. The image of my wonderful mother smiled at me on the glowing flat screen. Hello, Mother. Hey, Jack Jr., happy 21st birthday, honey. Only my mother called me Jack Jr. To everyone else, I was just Jack, Jack Stevens. Thank you, Mom. So, when will you be home? I have a gift for you, dear. Her voice sounded excited. Jill and Carl are here too, and we baked a birthday cake. Sounds cool, Ma. I just need to pick up my girlfriend, and then we'll both go, okay? Okay, baby, we'll see you soon. I jumped into the old 993 911S and started the engine. The twin turbos howled, and the four tailpipes spewed flames as I revved the six, just enough to hear a thunderous rumble in the underground parking lot beneath my office building. I liked this car. I got my dad's old Porsche from my mom for my 16th birthday. The family affectionately called this car posh. This was a special car, and only 183 were built. Even by today's standards, it looked cool and tough. Of course, I rebuilt and tuned the engine, and this thing tore apart today's supercars. The air-cooled, twin-turbocharged, intercooled engine now produced over 450 horsepower, and the improved suspension made it stand out. It was a true collector's car, but I would never sell it. Sure, it didn't shine as much as it might have on the showroom floor, but that just added to its character. It reflected me, fast but not too flashy, like a Ferrari. At least that's what I thought. I spat at the exit, pulled out onto 7th, and hit the gas. My beautiful friend was waiting for me. She laughed at my car and thought I was a computer geek. I knew it was true. I mean, anyone with 2 degrees and a PhD in commerce at the age of 21 was most likely a weirdo. She was almost 3 years older than me, but my God, she was stunning. Sea green eyes, long flowing chestnut red hair, and a body to die for. I knew her for quite a long time. In fact, I've known her all my life. She dressed me up like a doll and painted my face with lipstick and eyeliner stolen from her mother's vanity. Jade was the perfect reflection of her mother, my Aunt Jillian. Of course, I knew this story, and my mother explained everything. Jade was not related to me, although both her mother and my mother were once married to the same man, my father, Jack Assar. Jade was my goddess, and I worshipped her. I always have. She bossed me around my whole life. I screamed as I leaned against the curb in front of Jade's beauty salon. The neon sign said, "The Perfect Woman," and it was an apt description of the vision of the runway walking in those amazing heels down the sidewalk, leaning slightly and grinning at me through the glass of the open passenger door. That smile never failed to stop my heart. Hi, handsome. How are you, birthday boy? Full red shiny lips grinned, and bottomless eyes sparkled like sparkling emeralds. The door opened, and she leaned in to enter. This skirt was scandalous. The tops of her stockings were showing, revealing her bare thighs. Hello, beautiful. I leaned down and met the soft cheek of the girl who owned me. Her perfect white complexion seemed so pale against my bronze skin. She pulled at the edge of this piece of fabric in a vain attempt to hide the dark ribbons on her stockings. As soon as her seatbelt clicked, I launched myself into the chaos of rush hour, my skis hurtling through the heavy traffic. Carl said I drove like my mom, but no one drove like my mom. She had her own unique style, bordering between extreme skill and outright madness. My passengers rarely screamed, unlike my mother's, but we all loved her very much, even despite her little quirks. She was a wonderful woman and a perfect mother, and one day I asked her why she was so perfect. I think most kids have asked this question about their parents. She simply said, "Because I'm being watched." Now I knew what she meant, and I had the feeling that I, too, was being watched and judged. It helped me focus. Thank you, Dad. We arrived home, and Jade pulled her fingers out of the dashboard trim. God, Jack, I've paid money for less scary trips than this. I grinned at her, and she shook her gorgeous head and climbed out of the car. Next time I'll walk. 20 miles in heels must be less stressful. The car horn scared the crap out of me. I got out of the car and picked up my Ray-Bans. A black Lamborghini Gallardo sat demonically behind me, a gift from my mom to Jessica for her 21st birthday. The door lifted and two incredibly long legs swung outwards and equally incredible heels touched the slab. Jess was probably the second most beautiful woman on the planet, slightly overshadowed, in my opinion, only by her younger sister. Her reflective sunglasses hid the blue eyes that I knew were smiling at me. "Hey, big boy, happy birthday." She threw back her golden hair and kissed me on the cheek in greeting. Jess offered me her elbow, as did my Jade, and together we dragged the bums up the front stairs and into the hall. I was delighted. My cake was ridiculous, and the fire department wouldn't put out that fire. What hope there was for my poor, panting lungs. Mom handed me an envelope and wished me a happy birthday. It was a simple document signed by my father. It cost about $20 billion. "I have an announcement to make." I turned to Jade. She smiled and winked. Crap. My knees became weak, and I reached into my pocket. Jade, you know how much I love you, beautiful." It was a stutter. She grinned. I fell to my knees in front of her and sucked in my guts, full of courage. "Would you agree to become my wife?" My eyes glazed over, and I tried to blink away the saltiness. I opened the small box, and the stones sparkled in front of her. "Oh, Jack, this is really beautiful." She smiled warmly. "Yes, handsome boy." I felt weak. Everyone cheered. I think I heard angels singing. Thank you, Dad. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.